This is the Hagman and Hagman Report for today. It's Monday, February 17th, 2014. Doug Hagman here with my co-host, my son, Joe Hagman. Together we are the Hagman and Hagman Report. We are going to get right into it, folks, right into it tonight. This is one of the most, I believe, one of the most important broadcasts that we could ever, well, this is one of the most important broadcasts I feel that we've had since the beginning of our show. Joe, welcome to the show tonight.
Very glad to be here, and looking forward to the show. We do have both of our guests with us here. We're talking about the crux of tonight's show with V and Steve Quayle is More Dead Bankers in the Offing. This is an article you put up at the HomelandSecurityUS.com at our website, and I'd urge everybody to read that. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and I welcome Steve.
Wait, before you do that, Joe, I just want to say this. We have V. We're going to give it to V first. I just want to say to people about V and about what we've experienced here in the last, several weeks, several months. Well, for the last year, folks. V's website is roguemoney.net. Of course, he's a contributor to stevequayle.com. stevequayle.com. V is the guerrilla economist. He is somebody who's earned the stars on his shoulder and the scars from battle. Folks, his bona fides are on roguemoney.net as well as HomelandSecurityUS.com under the guest section. This is not somebody who should be taken lightly. He predicted many things, including the cleaning house of bankers. That in fact, he predicted that or said that was beginning to happen on the 10th. And well ahead of the January 10th, as a matter of fact, well ahead of what was going on. So with that, we're going to bring V on. V, welcome to the program. Go ahead and start us off, my brother.
Well, it's great to be on tonight, guys. Steve, Joe, and Doug, it's a pleasure once again. I mean, things are transpiring so quickly, and we are really, I often say at the precipice, but, man, things have gotten so beyond the point that we are, folks, at a critical juncture, probably the most critical juncture as we are continuing on in this collapsing economy, as structures are breaking. I remember back on January the 10th, it was at another venue. It was actually Paul Sandhu's radio show over in Canada, where I was talking about multinational banks and how they are intermarried with intelligence agencies. And that's one of the things I touched upon. I touched upon also back in November 20th that, there's going to be a cleaning house that's going to occur, and you're going to see hit teams in full action taking on mid-level guys. And that's what exactly has been transpiring. My sources have indicated that there have been quite a few people, about 3 dozen or so, that are on that list. And as these numbers begin to increase, folks, this is a sign. This is a major sign that we are close to the end. Now, there are some pundits out there that have said, well, you know what, bankers, committing suicide, that happens as the economy's going down. Well, the fact is, folks, the last time we've had bankers commit suicide by jumping out of the window of their buildings or trade houses and their skyscrapers are back in the 20s, and that was after a market crash. This is the first time in history where you have a large number of individuals all of a sudden committing suicide, quote unquote, and the market's going up 6, 7, 8%. So this is unprecedented. These things are just not your typical traders. These are men who are in very lofty, very high positions. These are individuals that know certain things. They are very keen to certain goings-ons in the bank. There are individuals that will be privy to certain deals, certain negotiations, certain trades that have passed through their desk or seen skirting across their computer screen. So this is not just a mere trader who made bets on a few stocks, hedged a couple of wrong bets, and all of a sudden the investment, the bet goes down south and he jumps out the window. No. This is far much more than that. And this has everything to do with a dying, decrepit system that is called the Anglo-American banking system. Okay, that is called, this whole thing is collapsing in front of us. And folks, this is what we're seeing right now, is cleaning house. And I'm going to try my best to get into that. There are certain things tonight that I will tell you, certain things that I cannot tell you. And I will try my best to show you. We're all excited. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that are listening right now to my voice, and you're wondering about names and who's involved and all these things. And these things are nice to know, but we cannot lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is that I'm going to really showcase for you, because this is just a microcosmic symptom of a big picture and a major global paradigm shift that is going on. And that shift, folks, is what I'm going to show you, is the death and destruction of not only the United States dollar, but the entire Western banking system is being thrown out the window. And these are all symptomatic reverberations of actions that are taken abroad that are finally coming home to roost. So tonight is going to be an exciting program as I try to detail clearly what's going on and where we're headed. And that's important for all of you to know, because if there's one thing that I want all of you to know, is that if you have not taken steps in order to preserve your wealth, if you have not taken those steps in order to ensure your financial survival and those of your families, folks, you got to do that quickly. And that is the most important thing, that we all are going to be prepared for the greatest economic transition in global history, the likes of which has never been seen, and probably the likes of which we will never see again. Not to this level and not to this state. Most of all, I'm going to show you what happens when a country becomes so blinded by its own hubris, so puffed up in its pride, that it begins to fall on the very sabers that it rattles. And folks, let me tell you, tonight is going to be that night. And I hope to God that some veils will be pulled back, some scales will be fallen from some people's eyes, and they begin to see a very clear and distinct picture, because the hour is that critical. I don't care what you're into. I don't care what is your favorite TV show. Whatever is going on tonight, folks, this is going to be the most important 3 hours of radio you will ever listen to. And I'm going to tell you tonight, you're going to get first row seats as we go through this whole chicanery with all four of us at the helm. And with that, I will either pass it over to you, Doug, or Steve, or Joe.
Well, let me introduce Steve, folks, if you're listening to us for the first time. Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com. Now, V has contributed numerous alerts to stevequayle.com. Folks, you can go back and you can see the build-up to exactly where we are today. This is a very sobering, very important, extremely critical broadcast. Please listen to both of these gentlemen. Joe and I are going to be in the background here with that. And by the way, we've dispensed with all of the preliminaries. So now with that, Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, good evening, and I echo and just want to say what V has laid out as the introduction is probably, as explicit and as poignant as can be made. You know, it's, it's interesting that people are watching the total destruction of the global economy. Doug, this week, and all the listeners who have been looking at my website and V's website, I know that the EU has openly stated they are going to consider taking all the savings of the European Union countries that belong to it for the good of the EU. I think what most people have got to understand is the amazing timing of all this, because we had the Vatican firing basically their head financial guy, and there's a whole story there that maybe we'll get to and maybe we won't. But I want to remind everybody, when Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, then the control of money is the control of all evil. And now I want to give you a new statement. He who controls the money of the world controls the world. Now remember, we're told in the Scripture to be wise. We're told to be observant. So many times Jesus said, lift up your eyes, for your redemption draweth nigh. And I don't think people get the idea, or even most Christianity, I would say, and this is a safe call, 90% of those who profess to be Christians, I can only deal with them, is they understand the lateness of the hour, how everything in their world is going to change. In the book of Revelation, we know that the time comes when no man can buy or sell, and no man can carry on commerce except he takes the infamous mark of the beast. I remember, Doug, when I first started on talk radio, that was looking forward. That was before all of the technology that was being developed or had been developed was brought out. It's almost like God in his mercy withheld certain truths until the people could understand and apply it. That's why so many times in the Proverbs, that's why so many times the Holy Spirit is warning and provoking the people of God to apply their hearts to understanding. And what V just said about turning off the TV, I have maintained that in order for a person to get their thinking back and their cognitive skills and abilities back, they've got to turn off the television. And we're not going to go into the mind control and the ELF, extreme low frequency, and all of the RFI, radio frequency, all the stuff, mind control. But what we're trying to do tonight is we're trying to put the world on pause for everyone so that they might understand what's at stake. Now, in the last week, today's Monday, towards the end of last week, John Corzine, MF Global, and if anybody doesn't know what MF Global was, it was probably one of the biggest rip-offs in plain sight where billions got stolen right before your very eyes. He's going to be responsible, or he's going to be the head of MyRA, M-Y-R-A, the government's plan to move every IRA, pension, every defined benefit program, everything into a pool that they will administer. Well, Doug, that's like giving a vampire the head making him the head of the Red Cross, and anybody hoping that anybody who needs blood is ever going to be able to get a transfusion. When they say they can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, let me say this, they will try. Unfortunately, the turnip will be the very lives of the people that have worked so hard, whose futures are being robbed. And this is something that I think is interesting. Most people have a 24-hour time clock that is now irrelevant. You may sleep or not sleep, as some of us are in that category. You may go to work, come home, do what you do, and have a 24-hour day divided up into 3 segments, 2 segments, whatever, or one solid segment. But these entities never sleep. Their evil plans, plots, and schemes are in motion. Years ago, I came up with a little poem, okay? And it was Rape, Pillage, and Plunder, the United States is going under. I got so much hell mail. You know what hell mail is. People, are absolutely not only telling me to go to hell, but they're raking me over the fires of the coals of hell, or V or whoever that tries to tell them the truth. The thing is that they do not want to take personal responsibility for their own future. They want someone to tell them what to do, someone to show them what to do, and then if something goes wrong, they want someone to blame. Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, each one of you must take hold of your life. I want you to put your left hand on your left side of your head and your right hand on the right side of your head, and I want you just to move it back and forth. Don't give yourself whiplash, and say, wake up, wake up, wake up, because we have to understand the lateness of the hour. And I love this statement. People tell me, well, you guys talk too much about money. Jesus taught in the parables that if you're not faithful with the unrighteous mammon, you won't be faithful with the true riches. And this is what we're trying to get across to you. I talked, Doug, today, and this is a fascinating number. I talked to probably one of the highest placed precious metals traders in the world. That's not bragging, he is. He's worked for the biggest names, and he's also the vice president of one of the biggest companies in the world. And I asked him simply, I said, my brother, I said, how much physical gold and silver is available in a given day throughout the country that people can buy? And I'll tell you this. This was amazing. I told V this earlier because I thought it was way more than this. He said there's only $750 million. And he ran through the calculations, and, this counts the U.S. Mint, the Royal Canadian Mint, all the mints. To put that into perspective, 750 millionaires, if they had $1 million liquid, could buy all the gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Now, that's not the paper market, which is in the billions and tens of billions. But there is nothing backing it up. And what B is going to get into is this, is when you interfere with the paradigm of the day, or what I would call the mass hallucinations of unreality, courtesy of the mainstream vomit brokers. And I want to say this too, ladies and gentlemen. If you watch the mainstream network news, and I don't care which ones you want to put in there, it doesn't matter. You are listening to literally the manifestation of the mouthpieces of hell. Now someone says, well, that doesn't sound very good. It's because it isn't. They are owned by the very people that are picking your pockets. They are owned by the very people that are controlling your mind. And so what we're talking about tonight is literally a wake-up, take charge of your thoughts, put those into action, and recognize that when we started talking years ago, Doug, and I started talking on talk radio in the preparation days, survival, pre-Y2K and all that stuff, food was the number one concern. It still is. And it doesn't matter if it's 9 million or 8 million pounds of hamburger going into secret government bunkers or Velveeta cheese. And I thought, I don't know if you thought, I thought, what a perfect thing for the rats in their underground bunkers. But, tons and tons of Velveeta cheese. I think it's kind of a prophetic picture myself. And all the drugs that are drying up. And today the biggest news across the world is that almost all antibiotics are now made in China. Well, boy, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if you're ready to make war against a nation, all you got to do is change the formulations of a few carbon chains and some of this stuff, and you got how should I say this? You've got a preemptive attack that was coming out of a medicine bottle. So when we're talking largely about the finances and all the dead bankers and all of the manipulations going on, the mainstream press would like you to believe that these men and women are just people that are, basically sad the way the market went and they took their own life. I defy anybody to shoot themselves in the head 8 or 10 times with a staple gun and in the heart, especially when that person was planning on a date with his wife or significant other. I defy anybody to tell me it's suicide when you're found in a garage hanging by the neck and there's no way that the rope or whatever could have been attached, the chain, to that garage unless it was a professional assassin. When V told the story, and I'm going to turn it right back over to him, that the teams were loosed, okay, I watched some of the biggest names without naming them, who everybody turns on and watches them on Alex or talk. They wouldn't touch the dead banker issue with the 10-foot pole until V came out with it. And I'm giving credit to whom credit due, honor whom honors due. I don't flatter my brother, but I acknowledge the gifting of my brother. He was raised up for such a time like this. He told us about the Bundesbank, and now, ladies and gentlemen, he's telling you what's going on. This is not just simply a group of, let's say this, barely related murders. This is not political assassinations. This is covering the tracks of the biggest scam in the history of the world, and basically the words of Rothschild when he said, give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws. Everybody in Congress, pretty much, I will say this, the majority in Congress, the majority in the Senate, if not the majority plus in the Senate, they're bought off, ladies and gentlemen. They're either bought off with cash or they're compromised with perversions. So the point is tonight, how does this affect you? Well, as the night goes on, we're going to tell you how it affects you. And for the sake of your family, shake yourself. Wake up. Arise, thou, all of you who dwell in the dust, and shake the dust off, because what's happening is these vultures, these venomous pythons from the pit, these hyenas and jackals are yelping and mocking you for how dumb you are. And I think that God wants to wake his people up. It was Doug, Joe, V, you know the scripture. God said his people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, not because they're not presented with the truth, but because they deny the truth. Go ahead, V.
You know what Steve said is absolutely right. I mean, you have a very critical time right now. And most importantly is this, folks. You got to get this into your heads. You got to understand that we are facing a massive, massive change. And this change, began to happen. It's been in the works for a while. It's been happening since 2008 when the U.S. economy collapsed. And look, let's be honest here. We never recovered. We never, ever bounced back from 2008, when, in fact, what we've been doing since then is digging a deeper and deeper hole. So now there is mathematically no way possible to bring this whole thing back. And I've said that many times. But I want you to understand is that the world recognizes what's happening here in the United States, and they are moving accordingly, okay? And, a thought popped into my head today as I was musing about what I want to discuss, what I want to bring out, what can I say, what can I not say. And I was thinking to myself that oftentimes throughout the years, especially in the Western banking realm, especially with these quote-unquote Western elites, I was thinking to myself that maybe these guys love it. Maybe they get a little stroking of their egos when we're out there and we're actually, exposing them a little bit. They might get a little tickled in their ego. They might kind of like it. But this time it's a little different, folks. This time when you look at it, okay, we are witnessing a lot of very, very high-level people about to lose their power, so to speak, and they are freaking out, okay? We are seeing a mass rejection of what has been the preeminent banking system for the last 50 years or so. We're seeing this rejection occur, and now it's nobody wants to go along with the Western banking system anymore, and the power structure is starting to freak out a little bit, okay? So when you start seeing these rash, assassinations going on, these rash, sloppy hits that are occurring, and then you're starting to see all other ancillary signs. You see gold finally breaking through 1,300. That was a resistance point. It's finally back up there, like I said it would. And gold's not going to go back down. Now you're going to see the march on the way up. But that being said, let's connect the dots a little bit. Earlier in the week, actually sometime towards the end of the week last week, I was on the phone with Doug. I disclosed some info from Doug that I got from my sources. And so this is what I'm going to do. Okay, there's still let's take a couple of these guys. Okay, so far the unofficial count's about 20 dead and counting. What I can tell you is what I know about a few of them. Okay, the first one, and I think Doug kind of highlighted it in his very, very well detailed report. If you folks haven't gotten a chance to read it, I urge you to go to HomelandSecurityUS.com and read that report that Doug Hagman wrote. It was incredible. Very well done, Doug. And so when we look at, let's just take two of these guys. Who would I take? Let's go with. We're going to start with. Man, hold on. I'm going to start with the J.P. Morgan boys. Okay, we're going to start with J.P. Morgan. We're going to go into an economist. We're going to go into a title guy, and we're going to end with a reporter. So hopefully you're going to see some sort of connection come out. Okay. So let's talk about Gabriel McGee. Okay, the guy's 39 years old. He's a J.P. Morgan employee. And this guy died reportedly after falling or, jumping to his death from the 33rd floor of the London headquarters of J.P. Morgan, right on the Canary Wharf area. Okay? Now, this guy was the head of IT and trading platforms for the London office. Okay? So this guy takes a dive after, before he did that, he wrote an email to his girlfriend saying that he'd be home soon. And the next thing you know, this guy is dead. So after he takes that dive, it's reported all throughout the news, throughout the world, and we all get this idea that here's this guy. He was probably upset. He was probably just depressed. And he decided to just take his life jumping off the 33rd floor. There's no coincidence there, of course, the number 33. Off the J.P. Morgan headquarters. No big deal. Nothing to see here, folks. Carry on. And then this last week, February the 3rd, we've had Ryan Crane, 37 years old, right here from Stamford, Connecticut, head of J.P. Morgan Platform Trading, also an IT specialist, working out of the New York headquarters, and he dies mysteriously in his home. Nothing to see here, folks. Totally unrelated. What's the correlation? The average American's so mentally discombobulated they can't put two and two together. Folks, let me tell you something. I'm going to make it very, very clear for all of you. London is the headquarters for all of the finance, all the market, everything. London is the nexus on which this whole thing spins. Wall Street is just the secondary ancillary to what London is, okay? So the headquarters in New York, in J.P. Morgan, is in constant communication with the heads of J.P. Morgan in London. They are always speaking. They are always talking. They are always in communication. The days in a certain UK bank that I was in, their offices here in the States were in constant communication with their offices back in London. That never ceases nor cuts. Now, guess what? If I am the head of a particular office in one division of the company, and I need to talk to my counterpart, who would that be? Well, let's just say I'm Ryan Crane. Who would my counterpart in London be? Well, I'd be Gabriel McGee. So why did the two guys all of a sudden just drop dead? All of a sudden they suicided themselves. It's pretty interesting, folks. These things do not happen. These things are not random. So what did these two guys, who happen to know each other quite well because they've spoken, they've seen the data, what did they see on their computers? What did they uncover? Let's get into that, shall we? Folks, if you remember, I painted a picture for all of you that J.P. Morgan is nothing but the front arm, the clearing bank, the dirty worker, the physician's assistant to the Federal Reserve. They're the ones who do the dirty work. And I've told you that the Fed is also, that J.P. Morgan, JPM, as I'd like to say, is one of the, what's the word I like to use? It's one of the manipulators of the gold market, the commodities market. Okay? They're caught red-handed multiple times alongside with their cohorts in Goldman Sachs, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England. They're caught red-handed multiple times manipulating the precious metals market, dumping futures contracts on the market, causing the metals to drop in value artificially. All of a sudden, these manipulators, these criminals, decide, hey, you know what? We're going to pull out of the commodities business. Well, you don't say. How does that happen? How does one of the biggest manipulators decide to pull out of the commodities market? Again, that announcement was made during the fall of 2013. And then what else happened in the fall of 2013 as we're moving into the new year, folks? What else exciting happened at the morgue? Well, they just sold their headquarters. Now you might say to yourself, "V, what's the big deal?" Anybody who's from New York, who's seen that headquarters, will tell you it is an absolutely beautiful skyscraper. That is a beautiful piece of property downtown. And they just sold it. That property, folks, is valued at $2.5 to $3 billion. That's billion with a B, folks. $2.5 to $3 billion. And J.P. Morgan sells that property to the Chinese to the tune of 720, I think it was 720 or 730 million with an M. So in other words, they sold it to them at a fraction of the cost of the property. And you might say to yourself, who does that? Who does that? Especially in Manhattan prices. Who does that? Who do you know in Manhattan? I know of no one in Manhattan who sold a property for a third of its value. It's unheard of. And here's another special thing about that headquarters, folks. That headquarters happens to house the largest private vault in the world, or at least one of the largest private vaults in the world. This vault is about 10 stories underground, and it's about the size of a football field. And it connects directly to the New York Fed, which happens to be conveniently right across the street. So it is this building they sold to the Chinese. Now, wait a minute. Why would they sell to the Chinese and then say, okay, we're getting out of the commodities business. Have a nice day, folks. What the heck happened? What's the connection between the getting out of commodities? What's the connection between selling your headquarters, a prestigious building in downtown Manhattan, for a third of its value? What's the connection between two dead guys? Okay, both of them top of the game. Both of them pretty much heading up the same department in two different headquarters, one in New York, one in London. What's the connection with all that? Well, let's take this back a little bit more. Let's take this back to the year 2012, where I, I'm speaking myself in the third person here, came on the radio, and even on Steve's site, I put out an alert. This was during the time, and Steve will remember this very clearly, because me and Steve had quite a few conversations about this. We remember this gentleman by the name of Bruno Ixel. Bruno also goes by the name of London Whale, because he was, he's a pretty hotshot trader. And he was one of the best traders in the city. And for those that don't know, the city means London. There's a strip in the city of London called the City. That's their financial district. That's the nexus, okay? So Bruno Ixel works in the city. And Bruno decided to put a couple of bets in the derivatives market that kind of backfired on him. And when that failure backfired, J.P. Morgan, who used to brag that they've never had a trading loss, and yes, folks, if Jamie Dimon, if J.P. Morgan says that, then I have a bridge on Mars that I would love to sell them. So Bruno has a loss of over $2 billion, it was reported. And from my source from deep within, I figured out very quickly from that information that I received, plus crunching a little bit of my own numbers, that the losses were over $100 billion. That's a billion with a B, folks. I'll call Steve. I'll let Steve know. I'll put up the alert. So here's this massive loss of $100 billion that the London Whale created, but it was first reported to you, the media, as $2 billion, then $2 billion became $5 billion became $9 billion became $10 billion. But the real numbers, folks, is a $100 billion loss. And that was later confirmed by another source and multiple other sources deep within. Okay? So, what happens here? Well, it turned out that Mr. Bruno Ixel, and this is deep information from one of my sources, that Mr. Bruno Ixel, the London Whale, made those bets. And what did he use as collateral for those bets that he lost? Well, it turned out to be rehypothecated Chinese gold. It turned out to be Chinese gold that were then rehypothecated to cover the loss because it became collateral for that bet. And so now J.P. Morgan has it stuck between a rock and a dragon. They got to figure out how to recoup those losses. But most importantly, they got to figure out how to pay off the Chinese. And lo and behold, one of the deals that they've done. Now, you've seen the build-up before the actual sale of their headquarters. You saw the massive build-up within their vaults, okay, of gold appearing and within the next day it's being empty. Silver appearing and the next day it's empty. Massive amounts. And then the sale happens to the Chinese, the whole building. Folks, that was collateral. That building in downtown New York, as well as all the gold and silver that they held, is collateral, and the massive amounts of fraud that was behind this deal and all the other dealings were uncovered by these two gentlemen. And that is why they were both, as we say in New York, whacked. Now, let's Steve or Doug, do you guys want to add to that?
Well, I would like to add to that because go ahead, Doug. You have some, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to jump in with both feet.
No, that was one of the facts that V had told me earlier in the week, and of course that was indicated back in 2012 when through your alert system, Steve. And I think it's very important that people really understand that. So go ahead, Steve.
What everyone needs to understand is that with the transfer of wealth from the from the west to the east, what you're seeing with the Chinese appetite for gold, I said, Doug, when I started talk radio 20-some years ago, I said gold and silver and precious metals are the barometer of the distress or stress of nations. One of the gentlemen that's listening to this broadcast right now is in Beijing, whether he's listening in real time or will hear it in the recording, pretty familiar with the Chinese gold holdings. And most people don't understand the history of China. And I'm learning the history of China. But the Khan, whether you're talking about Genghis Khan, whether you're talking about the great dynasties of the different rulers of China, they amassed what were in those days almost all the treasures of the land that they conquered. And there's arguments on what it's been. So I categorically tell you this, that the official numbers for both Russia and China are bogus. This man said, Steve, he said, his first name is Bruce, he said, Steve, imagine tunnels as far as the eye can see with gold. He said, the Chinese have an incredible wealth of historic gold that the West doesn't even embrace. Now, why this is critical is simply this. Here's what I believe people have got to understand. People get offed so that there can be no traceback or blowback to those above them. And with the if you will, establishment of the kingdom of darkness on earth in the position of the Antichrist and his little brother that now rules and reigns without any oversight, we're seeing such a, if you will, a painting, a portrait of the money moving, all of the capital, all of the commodities, all of everything that it takes to manufacture or make stuff is moving to the east. In this case, is moving to the Far East, either China first, India second. And what most people do not understand is the degree that which they think is American or is the possession of the American people does not exist anymore. Doug, the hardest, most frustrating thing for me to get across to people is this, and it truly is frustrating. Imagine every dollar you have in the bank, ladies and gentlemen, in the United States. Imagine every dollar you have in your retirement account, every dollar you have in defined benefits, pensions, whatever you have, that's already been pledged against the debt that is so unofficially low that it's sickening. The $16, $17 trillion is nothing. When you take into the factor of all of the high-tech financial instruments, and again, I go on record, Doug, years ago, and it's important for people to understand this, when I said that the derivatives were $2 quadrillion long before anybody else ever said it, almost 20-some years ago, and in those days nobody even believed that the derivatives were in the trillions. When I said it would be $2 quadrillion, just so everybody knows, I can count that high and my critics can't, but $2 quadrillion is 1,000 trillion, okay? And so when you're talking about $2 quadrillion, you're talking about a lot of money. And the point is that the Chinese, at the appropriate point, what B has just laid out to you is the sole purpose behind the manipulation of the paper market to enable the Chinese to recover the money that they lost through the whale and to get them paid back, because the guys knew, even Goldman knows, that the Chinese do not take kindly to you ripping off their stuff. And the goal in this whole, if you will, transfer of wealth, power, and technology to the Far East was to basically keep at one point the Chinese buying our paper. Then the Chinese would take that paper and buy our stuff. Most people in America do not understand that it doesn't matter if you have a mortgage with a Western-sounding bank with a headquarters in New York, Omaha, North Carolina, whatever, chances are, and I wouldn't say not chances are, it's almost a given that those mortgage notes have been pledged, repledged, sold, boxed, put candies on the pretty paper on the box and sold 100 times. And guess what? The Chinese expect to be paid back. So, Doug, here it is in a nutshell, and this is why these guys are getting whacked. The greatest transfer of wealth in history. We hear guys who have been talking about that, Doug Casey, some of the famous newsletter writers are talking about that. People simply don't realize that as their standard of living went down, and that's by design, as their ability to buy cheap goods was designed to pick their pockets rather than build American industry and build American business. Can I say something? It's kind of like thinking you're wearing clothes and you look down and you're bare bottom naked. And I'm sorry, but be that graphic, but the thing is, everything has been pledged. And, the magicians that somehow do it, and I don't know how they do it, but you always see them, they'll move so fast and quickly that even if a guy is wearing his trousers, let's use, or his breeches, his undergarments have been taken off of him even while he's yet standing. Imagine that. That's the only metaphor I can come up with. In other words, America, you're not only caught with your pants down, you don't get it. You don't have even the pants you think of. What you have is an illusion of a pair of pants. And that pants I'm likening to a financial holding. It's to be vaporized. It's being vaporized. And in the world of greed, in the kingdom of darkness, all is not enough. It's not that they want your stuff, ladies and gentlemen, and this is where I turn it back over to V. They want your life, because if they take you out of the equation, they have all the more for themselves. And remember this, they ultimately will turn on each other. Jesus said a house divided against itself will not stand, and that's what V is saying. There's some very nervous people, and I would remind everybody that Gog and Magog, the two giants of ancient British history, are the patron saints of the City of London. They have a parade every year where they bring out these gigantic, if you will, puppets or marionettes, and it's Gog and Magog. Literally, if you understood how much of the world is ruled by that area, when the 33rd floor was basically determined as the point of departure for that poor man that lost his life, he didn't commit suicide. That was sending a message to all the international global elite that the 33rd floor, that was a signal that they did it. They hit it. The international, and it was a high-ranking Masonic hit. Now, I want everyone to look at the weather in Great Britain, and I'm going to turn it right over to V. Almost 15 years ago, I believe it was, and I stand corrected on timing because I don't know the exact, but I think Hawk would know, but about 15 years ago, when Britain boasted, now this is critical for the Christians to understand because it's going to happen to us too in this country, when the pagans, whether it was the Druids or the compromising people in the Church of England, basically were allowing all of the attacks on the, if you will, the pillars of faith, they made a statement. They made a statement within a decade there would be no Christians found in the British Isles. Well, that was a pretty amazing boast. Very soon after that, I don't know if it was a week or two, I know I read it on the air and I responded. And when I said this, people just couldn't receive it. Because, again, everybody expects if you say a prophecy that the Lord said, if you say it on a Friday, it's got to happen by Saturday, or they're not only ready to stone you, they're ready to cut your heart out. But the point is, I said, Britain is going underwater. Britain will be flush because of their great boasts against heaven. And Romy sent me an email, and she said, Steve, I heard that show. And I thank the Lord that there are others out there that heard me say that. This is what people have got to understand. There is a cause and there is effect. And so what V is trying to share tonight and is sharing, and what I'm trying to share with you, is through all the people that we know throughout the world, there are some amazing people that still have a heart for the T word, the truth. And I told Doug, I said, Doug, use this word if you want. But we have moved from, and America was a republic. It wasn't a democracy. But the point is, now we live in a liocracy. And I was watching, I ate at a restaurant today, and I was watching Fox News, and it was that lady who does a good job of interviewing and just talking to a law professor, talking about that all the boasts of this current gentleman in the White House are so unconstitutional, so violating not only the letter of law but the legality of the law, and yet the majority of people still don't get it today. So what I'm trying to say with all this is this is not a political issue. This is a total life and death issue. You're being sold out. And those of you who thought through the Tea Party, through this political movement, that this thing could be challenged and brought down. Even Alex Jones has said openly, I remember hearing him a couple times saying he had hoped and he thought that he could stop it. Now he realizes he can't, because we're on the prophetic side of history. And in order to bring about the global New World Order, and remember this, not everybody goes willingly into that, but the West is so bent on that now what you're seeing happening in Argentina and Venezuela is coming to this country also. And so when V said there's 20 down and 23 to go, that's not just saying that's all there is, but there is going to be such I'm going to say this, an instantaneous awakening, even by the GP, the general population, that we're really, how do I say this nicely, we're really, I don't know how to say it, we're really screwed in the sense of the word that all of those, it's amazing, all of us, quote-unquote, fearmonger, conspiracy theorists, alarmists, those of us who have been trying to tell you the truth, guess what? We're being proven right. And we're being proven right, but what is it at the expense of? Freedom, life, future, hope, posterity, and we're being robbed of it all. So this is serious stuff, ladies and gentlemen, because these people don't just do the bidding of the government. I think this is what B was trying to say, and it's true. When you're across the street from the Fed, they are the government's arm of market manipulation. The Chinese know that, and when the Chinese want to, in a 1 hour period, China can make an announcement, they can basically put a bid out on the open market, and that's $750 million that is available in any given day. And even if you had $3.2 billion, they can be bought up in literally one keystroke in less than 1 hour. And I know how this stuff trades. And again, I find it interesting, Doug, in all these years, I've been warning people. If you can't touch it, you don't own it. And so that's what we're trying to say. That goes for the truth, too. If you choose not to touch the truth, if you choose to close your eyes to seeing what's going on or your ears to hearing what's going on and just hope that by singing, your favorite song or listening to your, whatever that thing is, the iPod, I guess it is, with your headphone that now have noise cancellation features, the point is that you basically have chosen to abdicate. Somebody sent me an email, and I'm going to turn right over to V, saying, what do you think of texting? I said, it is the most impersonal, destructive device for interpersonal communication that's ever been devised. It is literally taking the human factor out of humanity and preparing us for the most horrific future that anyone can imagine. Take all of the horror movies and all science fiction, throw it together into a central plot. And ladies and gentlemen, we're not looking forward to it. I mean, like wanting it. We're not even looking forward to the time it will be seen. It's now all playing out. These guys don't go to sleep. Fallen angels don't go on vacation. And demons are just sitting there with their unbridled lust, waiting to express themselves through stupid humans that simply don't know what's about to overtake them. Go ahead, V.
One of the other guys here, as we move forward on this caper, I want to detail is Mike Duker. Mike's 50 years old. Guy's worked at a Russell Investment for about 5 years. This is the gentleman, for all those that don't know. He's the one who jumped 30 feet to his death from the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State. I don't know about you, but if I jumped 30 feet and I hit the ground, I don't think it'd kill me, especially when you consider that the Tacoma Narrows Bridge is right over water. So if I jump 30, do you see how this thing goes? All right, so Duker, was reported missing on the 29th of January, and police said that he could have jumped over the fence and fallen 30 feet to his death, and they're treating this whole thing as a suicide. Now, on any other typical day, that's exactly what it would probably look like, as improbable as it may sound. But you got to look at the fact is, who is this guy? What did he do? What's he involved with? Okay, this guy's in Russell Investments. If anybody in Wall Street knows the Russell 2000, and the Russell 2000 is like the little brother to the S&P 500, okay? And the Russell 2000 is an index that tracks a lot of the retail and so many other companies that are not big enough to be on the S&P 500. So it's a prominent index, and the Russell 2000 was created by Russell Investments. And here's a guy who was the chief economist for Russell Investments, all right? And he was also the assistant vice president at the Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis from 91 to 2008. So when you have this guy that's the head of the St. Louis Fed, now what kind of role did the St. Louis Fed do? Well, you have to look at it. You're looking at the Eurozone. You're looking at the market involvement with the Fed involvement with in terms of MBS, mortgage-backed securities. You're looking at the Fed's QE policies. You've had a lot of things that come forward from the St. Louis Fed that's been published. A lot of the reports that come out with inflation results, with certain reports that have to correlate with CPI. These things are all put out by the St. Louis Fed. So Duker, who is considered one of the preeminent, I'd say top 5 economists in the country, very involved gentleman, knows the markets very well, has very, very top leads, very top contacts in the Fed, and all of a sudden, you see as time progresses, this prominent individual just winds up jumping off a bridge 30 feet to his death. Now, folks, that doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. Okay? Now, here's the kicker for you. In 2013, Russell Investments was one of several companies that were under subpoena from the New York State regulators. Okay? Their whole pay-to-play schemes involving New York pension funds. So, pension funds there. What's going on with the Myra? Steve mentioned that earlier. So what does Duker know? Okay, Duker has some involvement, from one of my sources was saying, with U.S. trusts, certain government trusts. And also, here's the kicker. There's a link between Duker from the Russell Investments and a certain William Broeksmit. Now, who was William Broeksmit? William Broeksmit was the former senior manager for Deutsche Bank. And this is the guy that was found hanging in his home from apparent suicide. Now, here's the thing, folks. Duker had very intimate knowledge. This is what my sources say. Duker had very close, intimate knowledge of the Fed's bailouts of Euro banks. Do you understand how illegal that is? For an American central bank to start bailing out European multinational banks, particularly Deutsche Bank, all right? They end the massive fraud that has been occurring with mortgage-backed securities. This is something that Mr. Duker has very close, intimate knowledge with. And this is also something that William Broeksmit over at Deutsche Bank has a very close understanding with as well. And it's pretty interesting that both of them, Broeksmit first and then Duker, wind up dead. It's very telling. Now you have this other guy named, I'm still trying to get the details on this one, but the UK-based communications director over at Swiss AG, which is a insurance firm, okay, one of the largest, most preeminent insurance firms in Europe, and their head of UK-based communications, the director, just winds up dead. And now my same source is telling me that there is a link between that gentleman as well as Duker and Brooksmith as
That's
a fact of...
Tim Dickinson.
Sorry?
Tim Dickinson.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's the guy, Tim Dickinson. And that link, folks, has to do with the MBS, the mortgage-backed securities fraud, and the various insurance frauds that are going on right now with the market. So there's a lot of things at play, and as time goes on, more and more details will emerge. But the thing you have to understand is that this body count keeps growing. It was mentioned from other sources that there's over 20 dead so far. There's 23 more to go. It's been pretty, very, to say it's horrific, to say it's something, it's almost surreal watching these things occur. And to see the connections and the prominent positions these men have. These men all know something. And what's happening here, folks, okay, you got a bunch of dead guys, but what's really the big picture? I'm going to make a statement here. From this point onwards, after this broadcast, it doesn't matter how many people drop dead anymore. Because what you have to understand is you have a corrupt system that is flushing itself out. You have a corrupt system that is losing. Okay? This is what losers do. And I've said this so often on the Hagman and Hagman Report and other radio shows that I've been on. When a state goes broke, I'm talking about when I say state, I'm talking about a country. When a nation goes broke, when a state goes broke, it uses its security apparatus, which was once turned outward for foreign threats. That security apparatus begins to turn inwards. That's the first sign that your country's going broke. The second sign is that massive amounts of fraud are tolerated. And right before the system collapses, those that are in the know that can be brought to testify, or can be brought to have information leaked, those individuals at the mid-level, because they had a dealing in what's going on, they have implicit knowledge of what's going on, whether good or ill or neutral, I don't know what their perspective was, those individuals are liquidated. They are sent on permanent vacations, never to return. Okay? That's what happens. Because these things are happening, folks, it is a clear and indicative sign that we are close to the end as we know it in terms of the American economy. We're close to the end. Months ago, I've told you, Soros dumped all of his holdings on all of his financial stock. Dumped all of it, 80% liquidation, pretty much. Today you hear that Soros, the multi-billionaire, put his money where his mouth is and put a massive short on the S&P 500. In other words, he's betting that the market will crash. What does Soros know that you don't know? Why did Warren Buffett cash out of the market to the tune of $49 billion? Why are all these dead bankers showing up dead? What's going on with J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs? They're getting out of the commodities business. What's going on here, folks? Folks, let me tell you something. We are seeing a massive realignment. And on the second hour, I'm going to detail for you what that all means. Because I could talk your ear off about dead bankers and multinational Western banks who have a colluded relationship and a collusion with intelligence agencies and law enforcement and how those things coincide. But that's not the picture. You see, I'm just describing to you the losing team here and how this whole system is being taken apart. I do you a disservice if I don't paint a picture of what is coming, of what is replacing, and why the system is buckling under the sheer pressure of a complete global realignment. And for all intents and purposes, folks, it's a revolution against a certain system. And that's what I'll get into in the second hour. Steve or Joe?
Excellent. Great first hour, folks. You're listening to the Hagman and Hagman Report with our very special guest tonight, Steve Quayle and V, the guerrilla economist. And I'm going to turn it right back over to Steve, and you take us into the second hour.
What we're trying to share is everything. The very foundations of freedom have been taken away in this country. You can say it's unconstitutional. That's irrelevant. And when former President Bush Jr. made the statement that the Constitution was just took the name of the Lord in vain, the Lord God of heaven, and said piece of paper, that should have been everybody's clue. But now, you know, I've said it years ago, Doug, Joe, and V. I said it's not about the Tea Party; it's about the Tree of Life Party. And again, unfortunately, people are still looking for Barabbas instead of the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to open this up with an amazing poem at a gentleman who is just, and he said, I'm not afraid for you to tell my name. I'll just tell his first name, Jared, and I'm going to post this on my website as soon as I can scan it in because my typing skills are not the greatest. It's called Call the Watchman. What V is doing, not only has he watched, not only has he been part of this, not only has he, through the years, developed relationships, the basis, ladies and gentlemen, is simply this. From this point on, and V, I really believe this, I believe from this point on, not one of you should say, well, I have an IRA, a KEO, a 401k, defined benefit plan, what should I do? I'm going to say this, and Lord, please let this be the last time I have to say this. If you don't get it after tonight, you never will get it. And if you do finally get it, it will be too late. Because what you're being told is that paper is going to be worth something in some future date. And anybody who's got an annuity, anybody who's got basically a mutual fund, tell me how whatever you invest in is supposed to generate or raise revenue or generate revenue to give you a return on your investment. It's designed to steal. It's designed to turn little nano pickpockets loose in your financial portfolios. There you go, V, nano pickpockets in your portfolio. But I want to share this because this is so relevant. And I got this in, and by the way, I don't know if, Jared is listening tonight, but his handwriting is amazing. The guy is almost calligraphic, meaning it's really nice. I wish I could print like this. Call the Watchman. The watchmen are shouting, the time is at hand, out on the rooftops and throughout the land, to wake up the slumber and raise up the dead, of the church that can't hear or see what's ahead. The signs are all there for those who have sight, who are called by his name and can see through the night. Take heed from that voice, a word to the wise. Remove all your doubt and the scales from your eyes. Suit up with your armor, your spiritual wear. Get ready for battle and start to prepare. The army is coming to kill and devour. Lay waste to the land. It's his last hour. But cast out all fear and stand up for truth. The Most High is here, and his angels are loosed. The war is already won for those who don't bow to the will of the serpent, for he is cast down. The destruction he brings will outweigh the past. The pressure is building to a critical mass. The watchers return with a venomous lust for the blood of the saints in a measure of dust. But splitting the darkness, the light now does come with the splendor and brilliance of 10,000 suns. A white horse arise, faithful and true, to end all the slaughter and make the earth new. No wars to bring sorrow, he separated the terrors and took all the swords and beat them into plowshares. Now I got that in the mail, and I said, Lord, thank you for the timing of that, because when the watchman goes silent, should be a worry for most. And again, the purpose in everything that V does, the purpose in everything that I do, the purpose in what Doug and Joe do is not to inform, that's true, but it's to motivate you, to get you out of harm's way. In essence, what we're telling you is a financial railroad track. You're stuck in the middle. We're trying to say, take off your shoes, get off the track, and leave with what you can while you still can. So, in all that is taking place. You see, when a country turns into a liocracy, why anyone would expect the truth to come out on the bankers? There's no such thing anymore except in the private field of investigative journalism. There is not. All there is mundane, repetitious, mind-controlling mantras of the vomit brokers in the mainstream media who are complicit with murder. When they cease to tell the truth, they become complicit against the truth. When they cease to even care about the truth, they are the problem. And ladies and gentlemen, if you continue to listen to them, if you continue to think that that represents reality, then I've got to tell you something. You're already in the enemy's camp. And someone says, well, you won't win any friends saying that. Trust me, I want one thing and one thing only, to know that when Jesus said he is the truth, the way, and the life, that you get that through you, even if you're a professing Christian. Doug, here's the thing. I know that this thing is upon us. We've all heard the FEMA camps, those of us who started talking about them 20 years ago, those of us who started talking about the guillotines, those of us who started talking about the report from Iron Mountain, all of the things we showed, Operation Paperclip, all of it, okay? What it all boils down to is this. Is it enough for you to say, Lord, and I'm talking about those who know Jesus, Lord Jesus, help me? Because, look, there's no way anybody's going to come out of this with intact. There's just no way. What we come out of is knowing that no matter what happens to it, that our name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. But the whole point in sharing the gospel, God can send the angels to do it, and he does it in cases where there's no one to carry the gospel. But the good news is Jesus is coming back. The good news is that Jesus warned us ahead of time in the book of Revelation what's coming. And the thing that astounds me, as you guys have heard me on previous shows talk about, is the mainstream megachurches have already betrayed their congregations unto death. They have already done it. Well, how have they done it? By when you basically say that Caesar is God, you're saying, and Caesar is a government, you're saying Jesus is not Lord. It's interesting. The early Christians had a simple statement. They had a simple statement that said, no king but Jesus. And what's fascinating is now you have a usurper that isn't even legally allowed to be who he is in this country, is the head of it, and yet every day the decrees become more royal, more dictatorial, and your freedom goes that much further. When you've got the head of the intelligence agencies lying and getting caught, when you've got the president being caught in lie after lie after lie, I submit to you, we are no longer a democracy but a liocracy. The whole financial world, beyond what you can hold in your hand, is fake. It's air. It is basically a fistful of nothing. At least the spaghetti westerns were smart enough to call the first Clint Eastwood movies a fistful of dollars. Now we got to say a fistful of rounds, a fistful of bars. But the point is, as in gold, the point is this, is that everything in this country has been divorced from the reality of history, number one, the reality of what true wealth is, and it's not a portfolio in stocks. And what V just said should tell you everything. George Soros doesn't go short the S&P to the tune of $1.5 billion and roll those dice unless he knows that he knows that he knows. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I leave those of you with stock portfolios, maybe V, you can address this. Where does the revenue come from except to be printed, meaning literally on the printing presses of the U.S. government, to make it look like an illusion that XYZ is earning? There is no more rental income except from the entity that's sucking all your life. When Matt Taibbi said that it's a giant vampire squid, there's no other way to have said it more completely, because a squid and an octopus have their tentacles and everything. And when you've got your testicles, men, taken and literally entangled with the tentacles of everything that's designed to emasculate you and keep you from knowing the truth and ever being a threat. Doug, it was the hardest thing for me to cope with in all the years of talk radio, when I warned the vets that they'd be systematically taken out one way or another. And I said that 4 years before it officially became policy. When the Christians stood by and allowed the word terrorism to be assigned to them without an uproar and without a recall of every single member of the Senate and Congress who basically voted for all the National Defense Authorization Act, etc., I knew it was too late for that. I mean, obviously, I don't believe there's a political solution. So where are we tonight? This is the last time, V, and I really believe this. I can sense it right now in my spirit. You and I will not have to come on and build our case, not our case, the case for truth, defend the truth much longer, because when it's in everybody's lap, they've already told the Europeans they're going to take all their savings. Myra, they already told you what they're going to do. And so please, ladies and gentlemen, do me a favor, do yourself a favor. Don't call me and ask me or send me an email, should I get on my IRA, KEO, or 401k or whatever. Someone says, well, I'd have to quit my job. Well, I'm sorry, but you might have to start looking for another job, and if you can get another job, do it. But the point is that for those of you that still have access to those funds, they will close the door. And V, from the first time you and I started talking, I'm going to turn it right back over to you, to this point, we have tried to tell people not only what should be obvious, but behind the scenes. So you've got the biggest purge in the history of the world going on. Let me just make a better word than purge. You've got collectively the most public execution and destruction of young financiers. What does that tell you? It tells you, I'll make it simple, the old guys in their pinnacles of power are whacking the young guys that can trace back to them. Now, B, is that true or is that false?
That's absolutely true. And the thing that people have to understand is why all this is happening now. Well, before the break, I said I'm going to detail for you guys exactly why. And I don't think the public, and I don't think the American public understands the big global scheme that's happening. And when I say that we're in the midst of a paradigm shift, or let me put it to you bluntly, we're in the midst of a revolution. And it's a global revolution against what? Against the very system that we're familiar with, which is the Anglo-American banking system, okay? Folks, how many times have I come on the radio and I said, listen, there are 24 countries, 24 of the largest economies in the world. They're setting up currency swaps to trade amongst themselves, bypassing the dollar, okay? And you might say to yourself, well, that's all fine and dandy. What's the big deal? Well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you what your money is based on. Let me tell you the system. Let me detail it for you. Let me flesh this thing out. Let me put some meat on the bones for you, and then maybe you get the picture. Here it goes. Back in 1971, okay, Henry Kissinger brokered the deal. All right, he went to the Middle East, and they decided that, hey, you know what, we're going to go ahead, and you have the deal with OPEC where they'll sell the oil only in dollars. In return, we will make sure that we'll never, ever build a new refinery. And that's why since 1973, there has never been a new refinery built in the United States, number one. So the whole entire dollar scheme that we're facing today globally in this whole entire world is that not only are we the world reserve currency, which was basically hammered out back in Bretton Woods, but we're also the petrodollar, okay? That oil, the lifeblood of every major economy in the world, every nation in the world, and every individual, oil is the lifeblood. That precious commodity is going to be priced in dollars. And for the last 40-some-odd years, the whole world was cool with it. They were fine with it. They didn't have a problem with it. Heck, even the Soviet Union was okay with it. And I'll tell you why. Because back then, America had a semblance of discipline. They had a semblance of stability, of honesty, of truthfulness. We were considered a great republic, democratic-type nation. We were considered a nation, we were a beacon in the dark world. We were the city on the hill, so to speak, okay? So people had no problem investing in the United States market. In fact, they loved to do it. And they love to go ahead and buy dollars and then go ahead and buy their oil and then go ahead and buy their treasury bills and hold U.S. debt and then reinvest in the American market. They love doing it because back then, folks, the saying, the axiom, the adage was the dollar is as good as gold. It's as good as gold. And so we've been running this scheme. But what what was lurking under the surface was this, that our entire petrodollar scheme was based on the Saudi pipe dream. I'll say that again. The whole entire petrodollar scheme was based on the Saudi Arabian pipe dream. Well, let's talk about Saudi Arabia for a second. Let's talk about at one point before the Russians made their oil discoveries, the Saudis were the largest oil exporting country in the world. Okay, the Saudis have the largest oil reserves in the world, and the Saudis back in 1948, they discovered 6 major wells. Okay, and these 6 major wells in Saudi Arabia account for all of the oil production. So here's this massive well that they've discovered, and we thought it was a great idea in 71. Hey, we're going to partner up with Saudi Arabia. We're going to partner up with some of the lesser OPEC nations like the United Arab Emirates and Oman and Qatar and Kuwait, and we're going to be a part of this. You know, and we're going to allow our currency to be the means of trade, the means of sale, so to speak, between oil when oil changes hands. But we didn't realize, folks, that nothing good lasts forever, okay? Especially in this finite world we're living in. And when we decided to create a model of that is exponential, infinite growth, we forgot to put into those calculations finite resources. Now, we both know that which is, planned as infinite cannot be infinite when it's pegged to something finite. And what I mean by that is this. The largest oil well in Saudi Arabia is the Quaye region well, okay? That well was one of the 6 wells discovered in 1948. And that well, in the Quaye oil well, produces 60% of all of Saudi Arabia's oil production. That well alone, okay? That carries the brunt of the load. Now, since 1999, folks, I want you guys to think about this for a second. Since 1999, we have been complaining, the Americans have been complaining, American politicians especially and people in general, have been complaining that the price of oil was too high. And back in 1999, I'm going to make some of you remember this, the price for a barrel of oil was about $35. So in 1999, we said to the Saudi Arabians, hey, you know what? The price of oil is too high. It's $35 a barrel. And the Saudi answer to us was like, okay, don't worry, we'll pump more. And nothing was pumped. Fast forward to today, okay, 15 years later. The price of a barrel of oil is about $100. And there are some politicians that are screaming and say, hey, the price of oil is too high. And the Saudi Arabian answer is, we'll pump more. Don't worry. Folks, every year for the last 15 years, oil prices have been etching higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And the Saudi answer is, we'll pump more, but nothing is pumped. And then recently the Saudis, a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, the Saudis have said, you know what, we think it's beneficial that oil is traded at least at a minimum of $70 per barrel in order for it to be profitable for us. That should have made everybody's flag. That should have thrown a red flag for everyone. And that should have made everybody just stop in their tracks and think for a second. What the heck do they mean by that? See, folks, you got to understand, the Saudi Arabians had a talent. Well, they had luck, actually. They were able to produce oil at the cheapest possible rate. That's what made them successful. Now, all of a sudden, they're saying, well, we need oil to be at $70 a barrel in order for it to be profitable for us. Why all of a sudden operating costs have gone up? Question number 1. Question number 2 is, how come they haven't pumped any more oil? They haven't really increased any sort of production for any type of long term. Question number 3 is, how come they have not allowed anyone for the last 15, 20 years to even look at their books? Look at any of the audits of their wells. Look at any of the assays that are available. How come? What's going on here? And question number 4. Why were the Saudis so intimately involved with the Qataris in the in the theater of operations against Syria? Why were they basically involved in a war for energy? Why would the largest energy, one of the largest, the number 2 largest energy producer in the world, all of a sudden involved in a war that centers around energy deals? What's that about? Well, here's a clincher for you guys. This is from a very, very top source. Saudi Arabia's largest oil well that produces 60% of its oil production, the Quaye well. Folks, today that well pumps get ready for this, 90% water and 10% oil. I will say that again. The largest well they have produces 90% water and 10% oil. In fact, most of that 90% water is the water they're pumping in. They're getting it right back. There's a problem. There's a problem in the kingdom. There's a massive problem. That's why the House of Saud is all of a sudden starting to import oil. Oh, no one's ever talked about that, but Saudi started to import some oil. What's going on over there? Why is Saudi Arabia so adamant in going to war with Syria? Why are they trying to become partnering up with Israel, trying to go after Iran? What's Iran all about, folks? I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get to Iran. Iran has more oil than Saudi Arabia. That's the dirty little secret. Iran has more oil than most Westerners know. And between the Iranians and the Russians, you have the number 1 and number 2 largest oil producers in the world. And that's the dirty little secret that they don't want out. Okay? Let me tell you something else as well. We've pegged the petrodollar to a finite resource in a finite region of the world that is the most hostile, most volatile area in the world. And we expect, and on top of that, we have a British model gunboat diplomacy that all we do, and the term was paper and bombs. That's all we got left. All we do is if we can't solve the problem by throwing money at it, we bomb it. Nobody wants to deal with this anymore. And the other thing, folks, you got to remember on top of all this, nobody wants to invest in us anymore. Because we're no longer the city on the hill. We're the cardboard box in the dung pile. We're no longer the salt of the earth or the light in the darkness. We're actually part of the darkness now. No one says anymore the dollar is as good as gold. In fact, you have the head of Forex coming out saying the dollar is incredibly volatile. So we've lost our prestige. We've lost our polish. And the world does not want to deal with us anymore. What do I mean by that? Well, about 2 weeks ago, we heard that the emerging markets, the Dow, that's when the Dow dropped 300 points and about 1,000 points in about a week, and people were freaking out, wondering what was going on. And I got emails, oh, V, what's going on? What's going on? Emerging markets, why is emerging markets doing this? Well, folks, here's the deal. As an emerging market nation, the biggest expenditure you have is energy and food. And guess what, folks? Those two things are priced in dollars. So when the dollar becomes volatile and the dollar becomes devalued, and it costs more for you, okay, when the Fed starts to taper, and it costs more for you to buy your staples because the dollar's buying less and less, you got a problem. Because the developing world, the emerging market, spends a great deal of the percentage of their GDP buying energy and food. So now the emerging market is looking at the dollar, and they're joining the rest of the world. They're joining the ASEAN nations of Southeast Asia. They're joining the BRICS, okay, the big BRICS trade bloc. They're joining the Eurasian trade zones. They're joining all these different trade blocs, these emerging markets, these emerging nations, saying, we don't want the shackles. We don't want the shackles of the dollar anymore. And they're throwing the dollar off. And America doesn't know what to do. The leaders in this country and the banksters of this whole entire country and the system, they don't know what to do. So they're in a last-ditch effort. See, before America said, oh, you want to go along with the program, we'll just go in there, we'll invade you, we'll do some subversive tactics on you, we'll have some proxy wars on you. But the last time America did this, guess what? Russia and China stepped in and said, go take a hike. They did that over Syria. They drew the line and said this far and no further. And what did America do? Well, we put our tail between our legs, and we took our ball, and we left the playground. Okay? They set a precedent. Now the emerging markets don't have to go ahead and kowtow to the Americans. They can now all of a sudden go to Russia and China because Russia and China will back them up now. Now they'll back them up. And what does Russia and China want? What does Iran want? What does the rest of the world want? They want to be able to trade. Folks, let me tell you something about the free market. The free market always finds a way. And what are they all discovering? What are all these nations discovering? We will use gold as a settlement for trade. Folks, the biggest shot to the petrodollar system, the biggest shot to the dollar as the kingpin of world currencies is about to end. It's about to start. It's about to bring the entire dollar system down. The first shot of this, hear me out very clearly, was in 2013 when the Russians signed a $270 billion energy deal with the Chinese. Let me tell you a little bit of details of those deals for you to really grasp this, okay? The details of that deal is this. Rosneft, which is Russia's largest oil company. Okay, you talk to most Americans on the street, they have no idea what Rosneft is. Rosneft, folks, is 3 times bigger than ExxonMobil. Okay? It is huge. It's 2 times bigger than Royal Dutch Shell. Rosneft has signed an agreement with Sinopec, China's oil company, that Rosneft will allow Sinopec, the Chinese basically, to go ahead and sell Russian oil. In other words, the Chinese will be the wholesalers of Russian oil. And what did the Russians do just to even sweeten the pot? Well, if you know anything about the oil business, you know that there's an organization called Platts, the Platts Energy Desk. They're the ones who price oil. They're the ones who set the price for oil. You know what the Russians did? And that Platts happens to be run by Morgan Stanley. The Russians went ahead and bought out the whole entire Morgan Stanley energy sector. Just bought out the whole desk. A couple $1 billion. Here you go. Boom. Done. Now the Russians will be able to price oil. The Chinese will have exclusive rights to sell oil. And here it gets even sweeter. Last year also the Iranians, in order to sidestep some of the sanctions that the Obamator has put on and the UN has put on against them, the Iranians have been selling Iranian oil to the Russians. Now you might say to yourself, wait a minute, why is the Iranians selling oil to the Russians who don't need it? Well, Putin, like I said before, Putin's a master tactician. He is a master chess player. And to get around the UN sanctions, what Putin did was this. He allowed the Iranians to sell the Russians the Iranian oil. In exchange, the Russians gave them goods and raw materials. Some of those goods were to help set up the nuclear plants. Now you might say, they're going to build bombs and build nuclear weapons. Folks, let me tell you something about the whole Iran deal. Here's the truth. First and foremost, you need to drop you need to get past the whole, I don't know what I call it, the American blinders we have on. The whole Iranian nuke deal, I'll tell you what the whole thing is about. It's about energy. The Iranians have a ridiculous amount of oil fields out there that are still untapped. They don't have the drilling capacity or the refining capacity to do it. With the current power plant structure set up in Iran, those power plants lack the sufficient power in order to refine this oil. They need nuclear power. Okay? We don't want them to get nuclear power because the Iranians get nuclear power and all of a sudden they're drilling oil fields. That's a challenge to Saudi oil. And we unfortunately are pegged to Saudi oil. That's an end of the petrodollar. We can't allow that to happen. So we spin it in the media saying, oh, no, the Iranians, they're building nuclear power plants to enrich uranium for bombs. Has nothing to do with it because the Iranians made it very clear. Fine, you don't want us to build these nuclear factories. How about this? We'll ship you guys the oil. You refine it for us. Oh, no, we don't want to do that either. So the Iranians are like, wait a minute, you're not giving us any choice. We can't build the plants that are necessary to refine our own oil, and we can't even give you our own oil for you to refine and then sell back to us. Then what are we supposed to do? Oh, you're supposed to stay under the thumb of the U.S. That's what you're supposed to do, like a good little third world country, like a good little developing nation, like a good little country. Stand to some of the U.S. The Russians stepped in, folks, and they're brokering that whole deal. The Iranians are selling the Russians their oil. In turn, the Russians turn around, sell that oil with the Chinese to the rest of the world. That is a tune of 500,000 barrels per day is being sold to the Russians. Okay? That's how the Iranians have been surviving economically. Let me tell you about another shot to the petrodollar system. And this is what there's all the banker suicide.
V, if I can
yes.
just may I interject one thing here?
Sure.
I'd like to draw the listeners' attention back a year and a half ago. An article appeared on the American Thinker. It was authored by Michael Reagan, Building on a Kernel of Truth. Now, this was the same time. This happened this was published right after Benghazi. Folks, we had talked about this so many times. Please listen to what V's saying. In the context of Benghazi, you hear all of these stories. What was Benghazi all about? Well, much of what Benghazi was all about. If you understand the Saudis, their involvement in Benghazi, their backing, their warehouses, their arms going up into Syria. And V, you mentioned this earlier too, about the exposure to our efforts to destabilize Syria. Well, folks, I think it's important to understand that the objectives there remain where we are still going after Syria, which is the back door to Iran. And, of course, what V's saying about the oil and energy. But here's the thing, okay? Today, just simply because we the new media exposed the plans in Benghazi, which exposed the Syrian anti-Assad agenda. Well, now, instead of going through the front door up there, or back door, I should say, through the Benghazi and then using the NATO air cap, instead, now we are allowing the ISIS group, and that name should be lost on no one, the Islamic, the group for Syria and Iran, or Iraq and Syria. We are allowing them to go open up a new front against Syria by way of what Kerry said. So I guess what I'm saying to you is the plans to destabilize and to take over Syria are still in place. And people have got to understand this. And what you said, V, about the oil wells being damaged, you can even go back to the first Gulf War when the oil wells were damaged and they were on the ropes at that point. So this is the geopolitical aspect of what you're saying. And Russia and China, by the way, are collective in this whole mess, this geopolitical mess. Now that the Olympics are over, and I just want to add this as kind of a cautionary note. Now that the Olympics are over, Putin knows that we are still active in arming the anti-Assad rebels against Syria. This time via ISIS. This time in the Anbar province of Iraq, opening up a new front. So it's not just China, as you said earlier. It's Russia as well, which goes back to, of course, the Rosneft, biggest oil producer as well. So this is not only about oil. This is about power. This is about control of the future, the control of the future of energy. I just want to throw that in there. I did not mean to get you off your cadence there. You were doing so well, but I thought I'd add that little geopolitical picture in there since I've done so much on Benghazi as well.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, Doug, because I'm going to touch base on Putin's next move on this whole thing. You see, when the Russians bought out, the Morgan Stanley energy desk, that's a checkmate against the petrodollar. When the Russians did the $270 billion oil deal with the Chinese, that is a checkmate against the dollar. Okay, that right there allows any nation in the world to trade with Russia in order to get oil and price it in their currency or pay for it in gold. Okay, the third thing, and this is huge. This is the Turkey-Iranian-Indian oil connection. And that is when the Indians and the Turks have been buying oil from Iran, bypassing UN sanctions, all right, and paying for the Iranian oil in gold. So again, setting the precedent. In fact, the Turks spent about total $120 billion they paid out to the Iranians in gold for oil. Okay, and this is important because you're seeing a massive shift in Turkey, and Turkey is going from the Western control as a NATO nation. Every day and every week, they are moving towards an Eastern standing, an Eastern slant. Okay, and Turkey is critical. Turkey is the bridge from the east to the west. It has historically always been a major trade hub, a major center of trade and commerce and philosophy and thought and religion. It's returning to its proper perspective because Turkey is a pivot point. It is a pivot point to the next emerging trade bloc, which is the Eurasian trade bloc. Okay, and the Eurasian trade bloc is something that today we've heard a report that the U.S. put out a report. We're going to have more active drones in the Eurasian area flying there. Why? Well, it's the same thing when Obama said we're going to have a pivot towards Asia. These are things that losers do. They're losing. They're being checkmated at every single level. Okay, and there was a time when we all talked about the concept of a gold-backed trade note. Now the trade's already occurring in gold. Why do you think the Russians, and I've been saying this for months, Steve's been talking about it, forever, all right? And people still don't get it, but now it's here. It's undeniable. It's staring you in the face. It's slapping you in the face. They are already trading oil for gold. It's already happening. The precedent is set. The beta test is over. Now it's the full-on implementation. Okay, folks, these are massive moves, massive losses, and the paper obsessed West does not know how to deal with an East that is hard commodity backed. They have no idea how to deal with an East that is obsessed with hard assets, and we're obsessed with worthless paper. I mean, it's incredible to see this happen. Okay. And then what happens with the Chinese? Well, the Chinese go ahead and they buy J.P. Morgan's headquarters. Checkmate. Okay? Deutsche Bank is getting out of commodities. They're going to get chopped up and sold to how many different pieces? Checkmate. Every single thing that's happened, 60% of Manhattan down here is owned. And some even will say even close to 70% of commercial real estate in Manhattan is owned by the Chinese already. Folks, let me ask you a question. Why do you think up here in upstate New York, about 2.5 hours from where I live, you got Sullivan County. In Sullivan County, you got the Chinese setting up an industrial park, an industrial zone. They're setting up industrial zones in Iowa. They're buying idle manufacturing all over Michigan, all over Detroit, all over Jersey, Newark, and Camden, in Pittsburgh, in Ohio, in Cleveland. They're buying all sorts of idle manufacturing. Why are they buying factories that have been shut down for 20, 30 years and retooling them? What are they doing that for? Well, folks, here's the thing. We've talked about a coming global economic currency reset. When that thing occurs, okay, some people get caught up in this whole stupid Iraqi dinari, Vietnamese dong. It is a bunch of nonsense. It has always been nonsense, and you are a fool if you're holding Iraqi dinaris. And please don't send me any more emails on Iraqi dinaris. And don't send Steve any more emails on Iraqi dinaris. Don't want to hear it. It's junk. Now, when this reset does occur, and it will because it has to, it's the end of the dollar, so they got to reevaluate everything. It's going to be based on assets. And guess what? We don't have any. So what's up with all the idle manufacturing plants that are bought up by the Chinese? Well, simple, folks. When the reset happens and when the dollar is devalued by my calculation, 70 to 80%, well, that instantly creates one of the cheapest workforces in the world. And I've said this so many times on radio that it's going to be the American making Nike tennis shoes at the sweatshops in Detroit and all over the country. And that's exactly what's going to happen because the Chinese are positioning themselves checkmate. So what do we have left? The Russians bought out the energy desk. They're selling the oil. The world's moving away from the petrodollar system. Everything we've pegged our whole existence on is being undone. What's left? What's left? The only thing we got going on is a stupid security state that focuses on its own citizens rather than existential threats. And that's the future, folks. That's what's going on, and that's what all this is about. These guys are cutting their losses. They're getting rid of anybody who could blow any sort of a whistle, and they're trying to get the heck out of Dodge. And let me tell you something. You got even in the city, my contacts in the city in London, they've said, hey, V, we already set up. We're ready for a petro yuan. We're ready for a we're setting up a yuan currency swaps over there. The Swiss are following suit. Okay, the Swiss are kind of late to the game, but they've woken up, and they're getting behind this. Look, their refineries are 2 to 3 weeks in behind schedule because what they're doing is they're trying to replate all the rehypothecated Chinese gold and try to make nice with China now. Okay, the dragon is not playing. And then all of a sudden you got Germany. And Germany's sick of what's going on with the Eurozone. They don't want anything to do with this nonsense. There is a huge, while Germany's playing lip service to Belgium, they're building hard rail lines to Moscow. What does that tell you? So they're getting behind this coming huge paradigm shift. London's ahead of it. They want to be involved because they're about to make money in it. But guess who's not involved? America and Wall Street. They're still holding on to the petrodollar system and trying to make this whole thing and milk it for all it's worth. It's a failed thing, folks. And we're about to wake up to reality. And when the crap finally hits the fan, we're going to wake up and we're going to be like, how did all this happen? Who's responsible for all this? And that's going to be our response. Amongst all the other tragic things that's going to happen when a nation collapses. That's the future. That's where we're heading towards. And that's why you're seeing these so-called suicides. That's why you're seeing all the massive amounts of fraud. Folks, I've said this so many times. When you have an economy, and that the anchor that we had was the U.S. dollar. The anchor that we had for the dollar was gold. And when we came off the gold standard in 71, we were pretty much flying without any sort of anchor. And when you don't have anchors, okay, you lack fundamentals. And when you don't have fundamentals, you lack discipline. And when you lack discipline, folks, you will find fraud and lies and corruption on every level. And that's what you have today in the financial sector in the United States as well as in politics. You have fraud and corruption on every single level. We have created for ourselves an unsustainable system. And that which is unsustainable has a finishing point, has an end point, has a date with its maker. And that finishing point, that end point to this whole entire game, this whole con job, this Ponzi scheme that we've been running for the last 40 years, that's coming very soon. It's around the corner. It's going to be remedied, and that remedy is going to be harsh. Let me tell you something. We've been running this Ponzi scheme, and your Ponzi scheme is only as good as the confidence that it produces within the so-called investor. Okay? Your Ponzi scheme is only as good as the confidence that it produces within the investor. And guess what, folks? I'm going to give you a harsh wake-up call. There is absolutely zero confidence in the dollar today in the world. Nowhere. I can travel to China. There's no confidence in the dollar. I can call my contacts in Forex. They don't want to touch it. I can go to London. They don't want it. Who wants it? Who wants the dollar besides some guy in the street who wants to go buy beer and watch his football? Nobody. And that's the world that I'm trying to prepare for you guys. That's the world that Steve's been warning to most of you folks out there. Okay? You have to do something to prepare yourself. And, folks, in the next hour, I'm going to talk about solutions. It's one thing for me to paint the picture for you, but it's a disservice for me to give you no solutions to what's coming. Steve or Doug?
Steve.
What we've done is basically we've brought you into the entire realm of what I would call reality-based economics. So many people, Doug, that are listening to the show worldwide, those on fixed incomes and those with investments, have got to get this. Just in the last couple of days, obviously, gold and silver have gone up, but when you're seeing 3% and 4% and 5% moves or 6% moves in silver in 2 days, and you're seeing this, contrast that and compare it, everyone, to the fact that once China gets its payback, whatever the number is that China holds, and gold, if it goes up 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, the thing that I've got to get across to people, Doug, and this is critical, is that gold always moves from weak hands to strong arms. The Chinese, at some point, are going to make an announcement. They already said they don't want to buy any more paper. All the back door and underhanded shenanigans that are going on is to pay the Chinese back, or some of the biggest guys in the world will basically meet with a fate probably worse than death. And the point is that if we can, there comes a time, here's what I'm saying, there comes a time when either the prosecution rests or the defense rests. We have, and by tonight, we will have given you the whole thing. Now, does that mean everybody who's listening to us is going to understand? Let me make it super simple and bottom line. If you are invested in paper, you don't own anything unless you can convert that paper to something you can trade for physical assets, just like the Chinese have done. They beat America economically. And by the way, let's not forget Kyle Bass's interview with one of the Obama team members a couple of years ago when they said it was the Obama program to destroy the U.S. dollar. Why? Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is something I want everyone to get. The people behind the puppets, the puppeteers, want global anarchy. They want global upheaval. They want civil war. They want everything of the old world taken down so they can bring on the new world. This is what you're seeing in the papacy in Rome. This is what you're seeing in the banking halls. This is what you're seeing in the Star Chamber when the decision is made to murder whoever. This is what you're seeing in the intelligence community as they attempt to be omniscient, because remember, if you know that they see everything you do, hear everything you speak, read everything your mind conjures, thinks up, or even postulates, they then basically have taken on little g, godlike qualities. The problem with all this is, and here is the bottom line, the problem is they want to destroy you. End of story. When they, in their own words, the globalists say they want to bring the world population down to 500 million, it doesn't matter if you do a whole week series on the Georgia Guidestones or you quote over 1,000 famous prominent people. You know, Doug, it's interesting because the story just broke, and it's old news to me, and I wrote about it and talked about it on talk radio about race-specific and gene-specific bioweapons. That's so old news, okay? And so someone says, well, how do you know it exists? I said, because I've done my homework. Look up Wutha-Basan in South Africa, and you'll find out. I know what I'm talking about. You don't. And here's what I'm trying to say. Get over, ladies and gentlemen, your emotional not wanting to deal with reality, because you will either step off the tracks after tonight or you'll lay down there. And let me share this with you. Sergeant Preston of the Yukon's not going to come to your rescue. Dudley Do-Right of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police will not sweep you out of harm's way like he did sweep Pauline with Simon Legree waxing his mustache and his top hat. The point is that you are in so harm's way, and I'm glad V said that, because in the next hour we will talk about it's more than just precious metal. It's this. Right now, Doug, food prices are rising so astronomically high. The people, I mean, I know butchers, and I have a sister in North Carolina, actually, who keeps me appraised of all the prices out there and what her butcher's telling her, and the price of steaks. By the way, in Bozeman, Montana, we live in bison country. Bison, for a pound of bison burger is $12, okay? For bison burger. And we got some of the world's largest herds of bison. Ted Turner's got one of the largest ranches in the United States, and they raise bison. A lot of people raise bison in Montana. But the point is that even though we're at the point of raising, slaughtering, and selling it, I mean, everything's getting out. So if people would begin to start, and I notice you have a sponsor, people support Doug's sponsor. Here's it. I'll make it real simple. It's the same thing with gold and silver. Get what you can get in long-term storage food, because most long-term storage food doesn't have to be refrigerated, okay? So if you don't get your food that doesn't need to be refrigerated, guess what? You won't have to worry about keeping the food on ice. You're the ones who are going to be put on ice. Again, the whole idea is this. It is to starve you into submission, to rob you of everything. And Doug, I know you must look at your children if you've got grandchildren, and I look at mine and I weep. I've got 5 kids, okay? I'd say maybe 2 of them really get it. 3 of them get it, but they're just like everybody else. They're going on with their lives. Then I've got grandchildren. I don't know how many I have, 4 or 5. And the deal is that I think of them. I see them laughing in the snow. I see them singing little songs. I see my little granddaughter on the videos that her mom sends us, and I see that, and it just stabs me in the heart, because they have no chance if the parents don't act, if the parents don't prepare. Most, let's face it, most 1-year-old kids aren't listening to prepping seminars, and it even goes beyond that. People are not preparing their children for the spiritual battle. Thank God we have kids listening to this program that are so advanced in things of God. I'm serious. I rejoice because their parents have told them the truth. God bless you, parents. And some of these kids, I'd rather sit down with the 12 and 13-year-olds that get it than all the denialists in the world. Now, B has laid it out to you very simply. I told you there's 750 million $750 million worth of gold, silver, platinum, palladium. The reason all these guys are getting out of commodities, they're selling their liar's paper, so when the lawsuits come or when the vendettas come, they can say, well, we're not in that business anymore. No, but you plundered a third of the planet when you were. But that's not the issue. The issue is there's nothing for them to back up. We're hearing of COMEX defaults. By the way, COMEX has defaulted so many times. We're hearing of the New York Mercantile Exchange. V told you that there's no gold in the vaults underneath the city. So why would China want the biggest vault? They must have something planned. And ladies and gentlemen, the point is that we've sold our heritage, we've sold our future, we've sold our posterity, yet as long as we watch Damavision, that's my new word for it, okay? Truth be damned, I got to watch what's the latest show? I don't even know, I don't even care. The bottom line is, let's take on the Super Bowl, or let's take on Satan Bowl, okay? And that's what it was. People will expose themselves to the subliminal and spiritual messages coming off the halftime show, and then think that V and I are not all there because we're warning them what's really going on. Well, I had a guy one time write me a statement. Well, I got my statement from my broker. It's showing me I have $844,000. I said, sir, you have an 8, a 4, a 4. You have a comma, 3 zeros, a comma. That's what you've got. You've got nothing but digital symbols for wealth. And I said, and if you can't ever write a check on it, if you can't cash it, call it in or whatever, and I think that, and I want to tell everyone, those of you who have stayed the course without whining, complaining, and crying with your precious metals, you will be rewarded because you're the only ones. And here's the last point I want to make. How do Christians think? When you're already vilified, you're terrorists, when you've heard all the stories, read all or seen all the videos on YouTube, military training for this, Christians are terrorists, Constitution are terrorists, George Washington, the father of our country, is a terrorist. And I'll say this, what would you expect a bunch of bastards to call, and bastard's a biblical term, save your age, bastards to say of the legitimate father? Well, nobody in their right mind is going to sit. Yet I put up a video the other day, and what people are being taught in law enforcement, the founding fathers were terrorists. Well, what does that make people who kill men, women, and children in cold blood for an agenda? What does that make people who stage false flags? What does that make the lying corporate media scum that do not, and that's the nicest thing I can say about them, the literally spawn from hell, conceived in iniquity, boiling and bubbling out of the brew and the cauldrons of damnation, who continue to give us these inane, well, Justin Bieber, listen, ladies and gentlemen, you've got, and I'm saying this seriously, you've got to turn off the TV, you've got to start taking that time with the living God, those of you who call yourself Christians, those of you who are really starting to get scared and go, maybe those Christians aren't crazy after all, you've got to get in right relationship with Jesus, because everything else we say and do, if we fail you in that, we fail you. And Doug, I know we're at the top of the hour. We come back, we'll give people the practical, what they have got to do if they intend to live.
Fantastic, and we are under attack from every angle. These Satanists that are the minions of this evil agenda, that carry out this evil agenda, are attacking us on the political, economic, and most importantly, the spiritual level. And unfortunately, due to the unwillingness and lack of commitment of true Christians, they are succeeding. With that, we're going to go to the top of the hour break, folks. You're listening to
the third and final hour of the Hagman Report on this, the 17th day of February 2014. Very special guest, V, the guerrilla economist. Visit his website at roguemoney.net. Also, contributor to Steve Quayle Alerts and Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com, a man who certainly needs no introduction. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very high-stakes game of three-dimensional chess, of multidimensional chess. And don't forget, folks, as V and Steve are both talking here at the second hour, don't forget Saudi Arabia is a U.S. proxy. Think Aramco, Saudi Aramco. Understand the history behind that, and also the Silk Road. And don't forget at one point in time, the ship, the oil tanker, named after Condi Rice. But that's a different animal altogether. But it all ties together, and a good book on the subject, a good primer for the period in history that we know of back in the post-9/11 days, Crude Politics by Paul Sperry, How Bush's Oil Cronies Hijacked the War on Terrorism. That's relevant to tonight's subject. With that, gentlemen, welcome back, and I turn it over to Mr. Steve Quayle.
Where we're going to take this third hour, Doug, is in, again, what we're going to tell people they must do. Understand this, that any pool of funds invested in any traditional Wall Street offering is subject to the manipulations and the contriving of people to get it out. V, why don't you tell, from all of your experience on Wall Street and all the banks around the world, tell people the attitude of the broker bosses. Just tell people how they hold the investors in total contempt and how they mock their stupidity.
They absolutely do nothing but, I mean, when I was in my days of trading, there's absolute contempt. I mean, we were taught to view the investor as a joke, pathetic, as a loser, just a punk, just somebody we just take advantage of. That's what the whole thing is about. We don't care. You fork the money over to us, it's no longer your money, it's ours. When you give us a call because your stock is down, 20% that morning, we really don't care. Our end game is to run the spread as hard and as fast as possible, and whatever we get out of it, and whatever profits we get, that's it. It's all about making that split. That's all that matters to us.
Is this? This is a question I have. Now, if I deposit my $492.50 paycheck this week into First National Bank of Kalamazoo or whatever it might be, that's not my money anymore, is it?
No, not at all. Not even at the bank level, at the commercial banks, and not even at the investment bank level. The money's never yours. I mean, you look at a commercial bank, you drop it in there, you're just an unsecured lender. That's all you are. So when you lose it, you lose everything. Okay, and thanks to rehypothecation and the rules of rehypothecation, we could take your $492.60 and we could take up to not only just 100%, Doug, but legally we can take up to 140% of the value of that account and let you sit there holding the bill waiting for the FDIC to pay you back, which they never will because the FDIC is broke. And that's the whole thing that people have to realize, that this is a game that Wall Street's been playing for so many years, and now the game's up. What we're seeing is just the last death rattles of a dying jackal. And that's all this whole thing is about. Prior to the break, and as I was, painting the whole scheme of what's really going on with a financial reality check, one thing I mentioned is what I want to detail is Putin's response, because this is going to be heavy, and how that will play with the petrodollar scheme, and how that will add more pressure to your broker that you're investing money in. Okay? Look, there's a reason why when I tell clients, hey, listen, you know what, you got your account at XYZ brokerage firm, give them a call, get them liquidated. You want to be in hard assets right now because it's a smash and grab right now for hard assets. Okay, it's particularly gold, silver, even platinum. Okay, hard grabs right now going on. So, I have my clients call up a brokerage firm and they say, okay, you know what, we want to be able to, we want to liquidate our account. Years ago, no problem. It'd be a click of a mouse. You wait a couple of days, money's in your account. Done deal. End of story. Now it's jumping through hoops. Oh, we can't liquidate it now. You probably heard this before. It's going to be sold next month, and then we have to wait for the proper paperwork so we can divest it into a trust account. I mean, you name it. Any sort of slowdown to drag their feet, any sort of smoke screen, they will throw anything up. Now, the question is why? Why all of a sudden? Well, thanks to the Federal Reserve's ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, it becomes very difficult for the traditional broker just to sit on your funds and just collect the interest rate as well as the fees associated with it. There's no interest rate to collect. It's 0%. So what do? Well, you take it and, you call up your buddies and then, in Wall Street and you say, hey, you know what, I got 300 clients, total value of all my deposits and all my investments here from all these clients that I have is about $500 million. Let's go play the market. And your buddy in Wall Street will say, okay, that's a great idea. So they go ahead and they take your money and they play in the market. And if they lose that money, oh well, that's too bad. That's it sucks for you. That's the way the game is played, and that's how it's been played for a while now. Those days are over, folks. Okay, those days are seriously over. Shifting gears a little bit, going back to this whole Putin thing. If you guys remember a few months ago, before the Sochi Olympics, we had Bandar, okay, Sheikh Sultan Bandar, one of the princes, one of the royal Saudi princes, took his fat finger and pointed it in Putin's face. And Putin's one of the last guys I want to be pointing my finger at. And basically said, about those Chechen terrorists? Well, we have an ability to control these guys. And it would be a shame if one of them got loose and happens to set off an explosive at your, attack one of your Olympic Games. And that's a threat that has not fallen on deaf ears. So the Saudis are going to pay, okay? I expect in the next coming weeks, in the next coming months, because now the Olympics are over, Putin's ready to flex his muscles. Now he's going to respond. And here comes the response. You're going to expect some low-level royals from Saudi to drop dead. They're going to be taken out by some very advanced Russian hit teams. Some of these princes are going to be running all over the world to their various little paradise hangouts. They're going to be running all over the world running for their lives. Now, the rest of the higher-up family members of the House of Saud, this is what's going to happen. Saudi Arabia knows the kingdom's in trouble. It is rife with corruption. Its population is teetering. A good chunk of its population is teetering on abject poverty. The majority of its workforce, which are basically migrant workers from India and the Philippines and other places in Southeast Asia, they're all hopping on planes and heading back home. Saudi Arabia is in crisis. Their oil empire is about to end. And what's remaining is not enough to really do anything. I believe, and a lot of the sources that I've talked to believe, that Putin's response will be he will grab Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud, by their nose and force them. Because, look, here's the thing. Putin's after the bigger prize. That is the dollar takedown, to get rid of the petrodollar. What he's going to do, he's eventually going to bring so much pressure on Saudi Arabia that you're going to start seeing the House of Saud start to shift alliances. which in the process will cause the U.S. to absolutely freak out, because they will have to shift alliances, because right now it's survival. And they will be forced, the Russians will force the House of Saud to price oil in their pricing model and not the dollar. And their pricing model will be the yuan. And that's something the House of Saud will have to do. At which point, I wonder, and the idea that's being kicked around right now, is what the U.S. response will be. And what a lot of top-level sources are saying is that they are going to see America all of a sudden start painting Saudi Arabia in a very hostile light. And, folks, let me tell you something. There is a great deal of Saudi gold in Hong Kong. There's a great deal of Saudi gold in Singapore, and a little bit left over in Switzerland. A lot of things are going to be in play to get that gold. Because, like I said before, there's a smash and grab that is going on right now for assets. So Putin's response is going to be critical. He's going to make Saudi pay for their idle threats. But at the same time, he's smart enough to take out the dollar in one fell swoop, just like how he masterfully did with Iran. Now, this is going to be interesting, and this is, again, another shot against the petrodollar system. This is why it's important that you folks get out of paper. This is why you call Bobby the broker, who tells you that everything's great, the market's up 6%. Oh, what are you doing worrying? You got nothing to worry about. The dollar's great. Nobody will, get rid of the dollar. You call up that joker who's your broker, and you tell him you want your money out. Take the hit, whatever fees, whatever penalties you got to pay it now, because the time's coming where you won't be able to take anything out. One of the articles that I wrote, and folks, you want solutions. Here's solution number one. One of the best sites out there for financial news information is roguemoney.net. That's my site. If you haven't checked it out, it is a plethora of insider information, a plethora of charts and graphs, articles that I've painstakingly read, 4,000-word articles, constantly you name it. That's the place. You want a front row seat to what's going on, roguemoney.net. It only costs you less than $3 a month. I have guys who are former top financial guys who worked in finance, send me emails all the time. They're like, "V, this is the best site. I can't believe I'm only paying $3 a month. I can't believe." I love the guys who worked in finance saying, "This is the only site that I would pay money for, and I can't believe it's less than $34 a year." That's where you want to be for frontline information on what's going on in the market day to day. Okay? The second solution, you need to be in hard assets. You need to call my brother Steve. Okay? I use Steve. I have so many clients I've sent of mine to Steve. It's the only one that can get you these metals. Look, if there's a smash and grab, this is the proverbial tortoise and the hare scenario. You got to be like the hare, and you got to move quickly in order to get those assets in your hands. Call Steve at Renaissance Metals. Okay. The other thing you got to do is you have to get everything else out in terms of paper. You cannot play in the paper no more, especially if it's denominated in dollars. All right? It's just not safe. And as time goes on, you will see that, you're going to see the value, the purchasing power that you have be completely eroded. Now, I'm going to throw another thing out there real quick. Over the last few years, I've been working on a way to have Americans expatriate themselves and set up international corporations. That's almost done. And I believe by the month of March, we'll have it all together. And I'm going to throw it out there. Anybody who's of a high net worth, who's listening to this broadcast, you're of high net worth, you want to be able to save your assets, you want to be able to get the heck out of this country, contact me. If you need consultation, contact me. GorillaEconomist@gmail.com. Get a hold of me. I'll be able to help you out, put together the winning strategy to get you out. And I promise you, and I promise everyone listening to my voice, by March, there will be a way. Okay, and I found what I think to be it's not Shangri-La, no place on earth is, but it's a good place to be while this whole thing goes down. Because you don't want to be here, folks. What's going to happen here, unless you're very well prepared, and you're not only prepared, spiritually and as well as materially, but you're ready to deal with the stresses that come with a country that's in collapse, then by all means, stay. But if you can't, then you need to leave. But that's the whole thing, folks. The end of the day is it's being prepared. You understand? Look, every single deal, and this is what I want to make clear to the audience here. When countries meet, the number one thing that nations talk about is energy. Okay, it's not the fashions, it's not sports, it's not food, it's energy. Okay, energy is the number one thing that countries are talking about. And guess what? All the negotiations and trade today that center around energy have nothing to do with the dollar. I mean, think about that. For the first time in a long time, first time since this whole petrodollar system was set up, when nations meet to discuss energy deals, it does not include the dollar. I mean, Russia and China alone have signed over 21 energy deals. All over the world, you have emerging markets talking about energy deals. And one of the things that the emerging market and the rest of the world has figured out is that gold talks, and you know what walks. Gold talks, and the dollar walks, my friend. That's the whole entire thing, And the issue is this. The way people have figured out is they can get out of the system. They can have fair trade. They can have a level playing field if they just get rid of the shackles of the United States dollar, and that's exactly what's happening. All over the world right now, folks, you're seeing trade zones being set up. The Eurasian trade zone, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the ASEAN nations all over Southeast Asia, that's Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, they're all setting up their trade zones. And every single trade zone that's being set up in the Middle East with the Russians, the Chinese, North Africa, all these things that are being set up, even in South America, you're going to see some changings happening in South America watch what happens in Venezuela, as they go into collapse because they have a bus driver for a president, as they go into collapse, and as Argentina falls, watch their slant. They're going to figure things out, and they're going to be latching on to the East. Okay? All these trade zones that are being set up have nothing to do with the dollar, have nothing to do with the Western banking system. When the Western banking system was prevalent, what are the things that we heard about the most? Oh, the Bancor. We've heard about the basket of currencies and SDR. That's all done. That's when the West was all prominent, when the West was winning this thing. And it looked like, sure enough, this is it, the Western elite is going to win. But now it's all about a gold-backed trade note. That's what this whole conversation is about. Every single one of my sources, before a couple of months ago to a year ago to 2 years ago, I've had a split of almost 50-50 of my sources saying SDR, other half saying trade note. I wasn't so sure of it. I was waiting to see which way the wind would blow. And folks, right now there's a hurricane, and it's being blown in the direction of a gold-backed trade note. And barring any unforeseen event, I'm telling you right now, the Russians and the Chinese are checkmating us like you would not believe. They have financially nuked us. That's the effect of this. They've beaten us financially. I've made this point very clear. People say, oh, China needs us to buy our goods. No, they don't. The largest sector in the Chinese economy is no longer manufacturing, my friends. The largest sector in Chinese economy is banking, and their banks are better capitalized than the Americans. And that's a reality that we're coming in towards. We're beaten. We're done. Throw in the towel. It's over. The America that you all remember is no more. It existed, but I think it died somewhere between 2008 and the closeout of 2013. Somewhere along that time, America's over. And that's what people need to understand. It's a different paradigm. And I really don't see, barring any major revolution happening here, I don't see anybody rising up over here doing anything. That's just the sad reality of what we're facing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve or Doug.
Well, thank you, V. Steve, go ahead.
One of the interesting things I got today from a friend of mine was a parable. I think the woman had a dream, and I want to read it because it's really critical for people to understand this. because there's an attitude of gratefulness that leads to greatness. There's a belligerent, gossipy attitude that leads to destruction. This is on my website, ladies and gentlemen, Dreams and Visions. Based on the parable of the talents, it occurred to me that today to bury the talents is to keep it in paper. To plant it is to put it where it can grow. Now, this is from a lady, a client, who I think it was her daughter maybe that had the vision, or a close friend. And here is what she saw, Jesus. Here's a parable of sorts. A traveler comes upon two farms with two farmers. Both fields are perfect for planting. Both fields are prepared for harvest. Both farmers love their work. They love to farm. The traveler approaches both farms. The traveler presents 2 bags of seed. The traveler blesses the seed and freely gives it to the farmers. Both farmers accept it. But one is hesitant. He tries to give it to the traveler, he tries to give the traveler the seed back. The traveler says no and leaves. The one farmer gladly accepts the seed and joyfully plants it, praising God for the gift. The farmer reaps a record harvest, producing 3 times more seed than the other farmer. This farmer is able to give away a third of his provision to other farmers, and he praises God. He's able to give even more than he received, and he still is quite comfortable. Oh, no, Lord, what of the other farmer? Now, here's Jesus' response to Aaron. I think that's the girl's name. Yes, he felt so bad about receiving free seed. He planted in fear. He didn't praise God, so first the crows came and stole his seed. Then the sun scorched it. Then with the last bit of it, he was afraid to plant it in fear of it being lost. So the seed became bad. Aaron, Lord, this must be me. Yes, I have watched you, Jesus speaking. Yes, I have watched you, and you are rewarded for this, but I'm referring to something else. It is your lack in faith, and look at the farmer. His crop seed was stripped twice. He couldn't take that again, the heartache. So he sat in his home and imagined being stripped of the 3rd time and decided to do nothing. He didn't think he had the favor to receive the good gifts of God. He didn't even look at the faithful farmer field for seeing his own lack in comparison. The parable's very simple. It's a parable of the 10 talents, but it was made personal to Aaron in the dream because evidently God was trying to show her something. See, this is the key. This is why jealousy and envy are destroying the body. It's out of the blessing of the living God upon a person's finances, in this case, in the precious metals and in having something to give. I tell people, Doug, it's impossible. Your heart can want to give, but if you have an empty purse, you don't have anything to give. Yet those who have gracious, giving, generous hearts are able to give more. I remember hearing Tommy Osborne say this, and I sat under some of his teaching, a lot of his teaching on tapes and a couple times in person. And he had a little simple statement. If anybody knows about the ministry of T.L. Osborne and Daisy Osborne, they live this. He said, I live to give. It's just like this. It's like V is giving 3 hours of his time. His time is valuable. Your time, Doug and Joe, is valuable. These are what we do with our days and our hours to redeem the time. But I want to repeat this one more time, and then I'm going to tell you what you got to do. Yes, I have watched you, Jesus speaking to Aaron. You are rewarded for this, but I'm referring to something else. It is your lack of faith. Now look at the farmer. His crop seed was stripped twice. He couldn't take that again, the heartache. So he sat in his home and imagined being stripped a 3rd time and decided to do nothing. In other words, he only looked at failure. He didn't even see that he was given the same opportunity as a first farmer who gladly accepted the seed. He joyfully planted it, and he praised God for the gift. That farmer received a record harvest, producing 3 times more seed than the other farmer. This farmer is able to give away a 3rd of his provision to other farmers, and he praises God. I've noticed 2 types of people, and Pastor Langford really nailed it, and he made it simple. I think he said it on your show because I always refer to it on your show, but he said there's only 2 types of people in this world. The Lord showed him. There's givers and takers. And I got to tell you, Doug, you and Joe and the Hagman have been blessed. I've been blessed. V's been blessed by having some of the most, and this isn't flattery or kissing anybody's anything, just giving credit to some of the most amazing, generous, and wonderful people who listen to your show and who have been responsible for keeping this show on the air, which touches 7 to 10 million listeners a week, and then possibly more. I don't know every download, but that's a fair statement. But see, the thing is Jesus corrects Aaron by basically saying you had the same opportunity, but your fear kept you from doing anything. Here's the thing. I was really breaking my head, and I have a hard head, but it seems to have had enough, bumps to know that, thank God I still am able to reason. But I was asking the Lord one time, I said, what is it, Lord? Where is the disconnect? I try and share your word on the parable of the talents. I share Jesus and Mary and Joseph having to go into Egypt, and they lived on the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Where is the difference? And 2 words. God gave me it simple, and I've said this before: fear and irresponsibility. They're afraid to take control of their own money. I'm talking about people now that V was talking about that are seen as just dumb. Well, I can't go into the other word, but let's just say this: stooges, morons. Basically, you're pigs for the slaughter, and that's what they call you. And yet Jesus is saying, listen, second farmer, you wouldn't receive it when I gave it, so did you have a feeling that you were unworthy? Usually unworthiness is based on past failure and a poor self-image. But yet if we're new creations in Christ Jesus, see, this is why V gets quoted. This is why I get quoted, not by name much unless they're ridiculing me. They won't give God the glory who gives V what he's given to V in talents, or me. It doesn't matter if I've been right. As somebody said once, well, he's wrong on a lot of stuff. Let's go to the nuclear incident, Doug. This has to be said again. It was God's divine intervention at a specific time in our history a number of years ago that 19 cities didn't go up because of some brave and amazing men and women who are without equal. Sine pare. And the thing is that we were ridiculed, but guess what? Then stuff started happening. Unusual seismographs. Even one of our skeptics, who's a talk radio show host, basically had his Central Intelligence Agency source said they were telling the truth. But you see, when you live in a world of lies, and the devil tells you you can never rise above your circumstances, yet God says he so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and how much more if you're earthly fathers being evil know to give good gifts, how much more will your heavenly Father give the gift of the Holy Ghost to them that ask? And one of those things are 9 of those things are the gifts of the Spirit. So here's the thing. The Bible tells us, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously and doesn't upbraid. In other words, he doesn't hold out. He's not a tyrant, blessing those, because the Bible says God pours out on his mercy on the just and unjust alike. So what people have to do is recognize this. It's real simple. Everything in the preparation movement starts, number 1, getting right with Jesus. What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? The second thing is food and water. Everybody has a preference. I don't know what they do with their money, but everybody has the things they enjoy. You have to start thinking more beyond entertainment and enjoyment and thinking practical survival. You have to recognize food, because we know, ladies and gentlemen, that with all the foreign troops and everything, you won't be able to go to Albertsons. And Doug, it doesn't matter how many times I said it, I'll say it one more time. Every single food storage facility and production facility and dispersal facility, whether they be hospitals, schools, college cafeterias, restaurants, wholesale grocery stores, those all get immediately locked down. And ladies and gentlemen, what V told you is when you come into a nation that absolutely falls at any point in history, to the victors go the spoils. And that's why and Doug, I don't think before Hawk and I ever brought this up on talk radio had anyone ever addressed this, because it's so obvious. What do they pay all of the hordes that are here, the 700,000-800,000 foreign mercenary troops? And if you remember, the president made the statement that he needs a better, if you will, something other than a military force. He needs his own. And ladies and gentlemen, foreign soldiers are bankrolled with $100 bills, and don't tell me it doesn't happen. It happens. Our own fighting men are abandoned, and they're forced to be on food stamps, and the veterans are being robbed of their benefits. Do you get it now? Do you get it? You get it? You get it? If you can't touch it, you don't own it. If you think that a piece of paper, and I call it liar's paper, is going to help you, what happens when you run your little piece of plastic through the machine and it's declined? What happens when at whatever point it, and people ask me, I just got an inane email from the same guy that's asked me this for 5 years, when is silver going up? My answer is simple, when it does. And he's smart enough to buy it, but he's impatient. I am too. But the point is that we're now seeing the rest of the world. See, what V is telling you, forget the nonsense about SDRs, special drawing rights, forget the nonsense about Bancorp, forget all the nonsense about it. The world is already bartering commodities for commodities. And Christians, here's the greatest disconnect I know. What do you think you're going to be able to live on if you don't take the mark of the beast? And by the way, the mark of the beast will be voluntary. It'll be so voluntary that you won't be able to go to the hospital. You won't be able to go to a dentist or a doctor. You won't be able to go to the grocery store. Chances are you'll be hiding out someplace or following the leading of the Lord to go someplace other than where you are now. What do you think? Well, go back to the early church in Rome. They had to hide in the catacombs, but they traded with the currency of the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are above all so educated and so entertained that our brain has been put not only on the back burner, I think it's been served with eggs, meaning scrambled. The point is that you've got to take control. So food first. Every spare dollar, someone says, I have $50, $100, $500. Should I buy silver or gold? No, you buy food. Food, because when you have food, you don't have to, number one, forage for it. Number two, you don't have to put yourself in danger or think you're going to go out and hunt. You know what's going to happen to most hunters, Doug? They're going to be ended up being the game of the day, and either their game taken or possibly them. And I'm sorry, but when you deal with starvation, you deal with cannibalism. We're seeing the outbreak of it. When I said that 20 years ago, everybody laughed. They just said, oh, no, that's another one of those alarmist things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, evidently the alarms weren't sounded long enough. As V said, gold, silver, platinum, palladium in your hand. That is it. And then you must find places, and God will show you how to do with what you need to do. You never know that the person you give a 1 ounce silver round to when they're starving might be the person that saves your life at a later date. And I would encourage everybody to read that based on the parable of talents on my dreams and visions. Then take it to the Lord in prayer and basically say, Lord, am I the guy that's ungrateful? There are times I've been ungrateful. The thing of my life, Doug, that I hate the most, that I want to change the most, is at periods where I complain and I'm not grateful, because God is so wonderful. And the parable of the talents, as it was explained to Aaron and shared with me, is simply this. You and I are given the same things, but what are we going to do with what we've been given? There are those who will get a hold of me, there are those who will get a hold of V, and they will apply what they've heard. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The people who have the wealth that moves, some people complain to me all the time, V, you only talk to rich people. No, I talk to probably 5 people that are struggling to every one person that isn't. But it's the people who have been blessed mightily that are helping Doug Hagman stay on the show. I pray for those people, and God gives them more. It's like my friend Cornelius. He's a businessman. He's the most generous guy I've ever known. So because of his generosity, God bless him. His business goes into a slow spot. The devil hits him, but he still gives, and he still gives, and he still gives. And may the God of heaven release 1,000-fold. We have such amazing women of God out there that are just amazingly generous. We have husbands and wives. I have a friend. His name is Jim, and his last name is P. I won't give his last name. And his son Kenneth, that have been 2 of my biggest supporters. And Jim's wife just passed away. And upon her passing, he sent me some money, a couple $1,000 to help people out. And that's the kind of heart he has. And his desire in all the years I've known him, simply one of the most generous men I've ever known, was to hear literally the voice of God. So you can bet you know what I'm praying for him. And he's an amazing man. And I can't even talk about his past. But let me just say this to you. I would say the hours I spent with him were better than any PhD. Well, that'll make people who have letters in science be furious. But can I say something? When you're in the trenches and the guy next to you teaches you how to get out of the trench with your life and with your, let's say this, with your life and your family's life, you probably ought to listen to the trenches, because all the keyboard warriors, Doug, you and I, V gets them too, they basically, can I say something? If some guy doesn't have two nickels to rub together, or he's bitter, and basically he's mad because I don't do enough for him, and when I do enough, then he comes back and bites me. The bottom line is that I can only say this. He definitely is in the camp of the second farmer. It's not what you have or haven't been given initially. It's who has the ability to change your circumstances. The scripture specifically says that God will give seed to the sower. I hope tonight, Doug, that people listen to what V and I have said. V laid out the whole world for you, ladies and gentlemen. The most, what people have complex theories and absolute chaos theories and every other theory on economics, but let me just make it easy. This isn't the magic bean story of Jack and the Beanstalk. This is what you can do with a little. When Moses went to the mount, when he came down, even when God sent him to Egypt to command Pharaoh to let the Hebrews go free, Moses was looking for something. God, what shall I do? What shall I do? And God took the staff that Moses was given by Pharaoh to defeat the Egyptians with that very thing that they mocked him with. Stand in the testimony. Stand in your boldness. And for those of you that still have a little time, please, please, please think about this. If you were to lose everything tomorrow, what would that do to your future? If you have this week or next week, and I don't know how many weeks, to transfer out, to get out, you're already being told every single IRA, KEO, 401k, pension, retirement fund is going to be taken. And yet the band plays on. V gets his emails. I get mine. We have spelled it out. We have shared with you. You can basically contact V for consulting. He's working on something that he'll make the announcement. If any of you are interested, I have a client, and I do. She's a neat woman of God. Let me just tell you this. She bought property in Costa Rica, okay? And people said they would go down, join her. So she ends up funding this amazing survival property in Costa Rica. I mean, it's beautiful. And the people who were, I guess, her brethren ducked out on her. If anybody wants to see the listing, I'll send it to you. Just send me Steve777. I want to help her out because basically she threw it all on the line for others, and people betrayed her. I will put you in contact with her, and personally I'm familiar with pricing down there, and I can share this with you. It's an amazing property if that's where you think you want to live. John Price and others have gone there. Obviously, there are pros, there are cons, and she's asking, $275,000 for the most amazing 8-bedroom house. It's got everything, waterfalls, lakes. I mean, it's got the whole 9 yards. So please, and I'm saying that to help a sister in the Lord. I'm not a realtor. There's nothing in it except to help this lady out because I feel for her. Doug, I told you, all through my Christian walk, every coward I've ever known was said, well, we're behind you, Steve. And when, let's just say this, when it was my time to meet the dragon, there was nobody to be found. And, oh, by the way, they sure were behind me, and it was with a knife, okay? It is with a knife in my back. So, V, go ahead and take it from here. I've pretty well said everything I need to say. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm praying for you to know how to make the right decision. I pray that V, coming out of the brokerage world, has told you the contempt, and therefore you're nothing but a pig for the slaughter, and everything you have they want. They're not content with most of everything, or excuse me, most of almost everything. They want it all. Is that accurate, V?
Absolutely. There's so many things happening. I mean, as we're facing this massive, massive transition, folks, as America is being checkmated and taken down financially and economically all throughout the world because we have the most idiotic policies in existence, as we will become the very nation that we will be falling on the very saber that we rattle, as we commit economic suicide on ourselves and watch the greatest country in the history of the world be absolutely dismantled and taken apart and sold piecemeal, and to watch the citizens of the greatest, freest land work as slaves in sweatshops, making parts and wares and goods to be enjoyed by the rest of the world that was at one time shackled by the U.S. dollar and the American hegemony. It's sad. It's absolutely sad. You know, and one of the biggest news that I want people to really understand is also this. When you take the six oil-producing countries, the six biggest oil-producing countries in the Middle East, that's Saudi Arabia, well, let me put it this way, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, the UAE, which is the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, all six of them, okay, guess what the Middle East's number one trading partner was? And, you know, most Americans would think it's America. No, it's China. The trade between the Middle Eastern nations and the Chinese last year stood at over $300 billion. What's the Chinese doing that's different from what America's gunboat suicide policy is all about? Well, simple. Number one, the Chinese, they figured out, hey, let's just stay out of the regional politics. Whatever the beef amongst Arabs and Muslims and a small percentage of Jews occupying a space of land called Israel, whatever their politics are, whatever the regional beefs they have with each other, who cares? Let those beefs exist. What we're going to do is we're not going to seek any alliances with none of them. We're just going to seek partnerships and business ventures with all of them. So that's what they're doing. They're building shopping malls. They're in the process of building high-speed rails. These are all massive projects that the Chinese are doing and in the process of doing in the Middle East. So that being said, guess what all these Arab monarchies are starting to realize? That they cannot rely upon the U.S. to get behind their initiative to take down Syria. They can't rely upon the U.S. nor the U.S. dollar to make sure that their oil empires remain intact. Because let's be honest here, folks, if you're a Middle Eastern fiefdom and you have your currency, okay, your economy is dependent on oil being traded for dollars, and all of a sudden those dollars begin to hyperinflate and lose value at an astronomical rate, as it is being done right now. I mean, the dollar is being printed to oblivion. You kind of worry. You start looking for real stable players. And the Middle East is absolutely being covered up very nicely and played very well by the Russians and the Chinese. And that's exactly where the biggest movers and shakers in the Middle East, the six big countries over there, are already closing up to the Russians. They're already closing up to the Chinese. And let me tell you, from deep, deep inside sources, the Arabs are sick of Americans. They are sick of the dollar, and they are ready for a yuan swap. They are preparing the world right now for a petro-yuan, which in reality, folks, will be petro-gold. And gold is coming back with a vengeance on the trading floor, on the global trading circuit. Gold is where it's going to be at. Okay, and I'm telling you right now, this is your time. Get involved on this, because you're about to see the greatest paradigm shift in the history of this world. And folks, let me tell you, I have a proven track record, and I've called this whole banker hits, and for months before this thing even happened. So it's coming down now. It's coming down to the wire. We are in the last stages of this collapse. And it's been a collapse that's been occurring since 2008. Let me tell you something, folks. I don't care what the Dow is. I don't care if the Dow goes to 20,000 tomorrow morning. I don't care. It's a fake market. I don't care if the price of gold drops to $1. I don't care, because it's a fraudulent market. Why would I let a fraudulent market dictate to me what the value of a true hard asset is? Explain that to me. Folks, let me tell you. Here's an example I like to give you. If you take a watch, let's say I give you a watch, okay, and that watch is a Rolex Submariner, and you know for certain that watch is worth at least $5,000, okay, and you take that Rolex Submariner, and you take it to your local neighborhood pawn shop. And you go to that pawnbroker and you say, hey, I want to sell you this Rolex Submariner. The guy looks at you, looks at the watch and says, okay, I'll give you $15. What the heck would you do? You would turn around and walk out. You would think to yourself that this man's a con man, or B, this man doesn't know nothing about the true value of a real watch, a real asset, okay? And that's basically what's happening in America. People freak out, oh, silver's down to $18. Oh, gold is $1,200. I'm going to dump everything. You're a fool. You're equivalent of a fool that walks into a pawn shop and pawns over a $5,000 Rolex Submariner for $15. You're a fool. That asset you're holding, that yellow metal, for folks, if you're holding that yellow metal, I'm not talking about people who are holding it in paper and ETFs. I'm talking about those. You're holding it. You're kind of freaking out about where the market's going to go. Let me tell you something. What you're holding is something that's $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 an ounce. That's what you're holding, okay? You're holding platinum. You're holding something that's super precious, okay? That's also going to be in $50,000, $60,000 an ounce. And silver, which will be in the thousands an ounce, okay? That's what you're holding, because these are real, hard, tangible assets. I'm heavy on gold. I'm heavy on platinum. Okay, these are great metals for you to grab while you still can. And I'm telling you right now, folks, get ready, because the world's already moved. Okay, the world's already moved. They've already come to an agreement to get rid of the dollar. What do you think Ukraine, the debacle in Ukraine is all about? Folks, that's just petrodollar survival. That's just America doing what it can to do what? To disrupt what? The Eurasian trade zone, which Ukraine's a big pivot point of. What do you think also that Euro collapse with Greece is all about? Greece is a pivot point. Turkey is a pivot point. These are all very important zones, okay? And that's why you're having, American intelligence-backed NGOs going in there creating these fake protests, trying to disrupt what's going on in the Ukraine. Simply put, Ukraine is very integral to the energy trade. They are integral to the Eurasian trade zone, okay? And these are the different types of trade blocks that America, and they can't do it military. They ain't got the muscle to do it. But they're going to try to do it sneaky-wise. They're trying to do it under the table, behind the scenes, under the shadows. And the Russians are calling them out. That's why the Russians have kicked out so many American NGOs. That's why the Ukrainians are even protesting with signs, America, get out. Because they already see what it is. The world sees us for who we are. That we're an emperor that has no clothes. We're the bum. We're the guy hanging out after the parties. After the party's over, everybody's gone home. We're the bum hanging out by the punch bowl. That's all we are. And the rest of the world sees it. The problem is, folks, you don't see it. The problem is your countrymen don't see it. And because they don't see it and they're not awake, what's going to happen is going to catch them unawares. And that's something I'm trying to help and trying to warn against. And that's it, folks. I mean, there's nothing more than I can say than that. I mean, if you want to get front row seats to the financial collapse of the United States and understand what global economics is all about, join my site, roguemoney.net. You want to get gold, you can contact Steve at Renaissance Metals. Steve has his email. You can contact me for financial consulting. It's gorillaeconomist@gmail.com. I'll put together a game plan for you and advise you on what the heck you need to do to get your financial house in order. How are you going to preserve your wealth? Okay, how are you going to preserve your wealth? You got hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting out there in paper. You're a madman. You're crazy. I fear for you. Okay, because I know what's going to happen. All right, when you got Dodd-Frank written into the law saying that, hey, you know what, bail-ins are going to happen. We're going to take your money. We're going to confiscate it. You got Myra, basically the government about to confiscate all your pension, all your 401k. Just like what they did. They beta tested this in Poland, but you didn't pay attention. You're too busy watching football. You're too busy following Justin Bieber getting arrested. You didn't pay attention to that. But yeah, they beta tested it in Poland first. And now what's the EU doing? Oh yeah, we're going to take all your pensions. Folks, you want to be in paper, you go ahead, you play that game. You think you have it all together because you know how to pick a few stocks? Go ahead, play that game. Play that game, because in the end, you're going to get played. You're going to be hung out to dry, and everything you've ever worked for will be gone in a poof, just like that, over. And you, my friend, will just be another statistic. you, my friend, will be the dumb American. I'm telling you right now, you need to wake up. You need to wake up and understand that there's a massive change. The world's already moved on without you. Okay, the world has already moved on without the American. It's just that the American hasn't woken up and seen that he has been left behind. That's all I got to say, Doug.
Well, thank you, V, and Steve, thank you as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain one thing or say, well, a couple of things. Number one, the galvanizing part of what we're talking about here today. We're talking about dollars, cents, money, economics, geopolitical issues. But the one galvanizing thing is that we are talking about this in a biblical Christian godlike perspective, and I think that separates us from others. The second thing is, and let me categorically affirm this or state this without reservation, the Hagman and Hagman Report stands behind V, the guerrilla economist, and Steve Quayle, 100%. They are our brothers, and we anything that they say and do, I'll tell you what, we are 100% behind them. Steve with precious metals, Renaissance, any metals, definitely look up Steve. V, you've got a fantastic resource there, and I want to thank you for that. And just one more thing to the listeners of this broadcast, our extended family. You are our extended family. Look, 98% of us cannot afford to flee the country, to get out of the country. And those of us who are here, me included, Joe included, at least to my knowledge, we will fight side by side, shoulder to shoulder with you. And you know, that's a great thing about this broadcast, and Steve and V. They are here to lift you up, and they have done so, provide you information, and have done so. And for that, we thank them very much. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of our program. Steve, I want to thank you so much. V, I want to thank you so much. A very historic broadcast. I know right now well over 300,000 live listens in at least 40 countries that I can see right now. So you've touched a lot of minds and a lot of hearts, and I want to say thank you for that.
Well, good night, Doug. Good night, Joe. Good night, everyone. And please,